I welcome you to the meeting of Full Council this evening. I am the Mayor of Rugby, Carolyn Watson-Merritt, and will be chairing the meeting. This meeting is being web streamed to the public through the Council's YouTube channel. During the meeting, if you wish to speak, please use the push to talk button on the microphone in front of you and remember to cancel it after you've finished. Before we begin the formal agenda, I will ask the Chief Executive to provide details of the evacuation process for those present.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There's no fire drill scheduled in the building this evening. If the fire alarm sounds, then please make your way out of the building, down the main staircase and out of the main doors of the Town Hall and congregate at the entrance to Caldecott Park, and an officer will be able to give you instructions on when it's safe to return to the building. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Due to the lengthy agenda and the number of motions and possible amendments, I propose suspension of 13.6G and H of Part 3A of the Council's Standing Orders. This will result in no second vote being taken if an amended motion is carried. The amended carried motion will then take the place of the substantive motion with no further vote being taken. Who will second the motion?
Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Those in favour, please show. Those against, please show. The motion is carried. Apologies for absence. Are there any apologies, Chief Executive?
Madam Mayor, I have apologies for Miss Dumbleton, Eccleston, Mrs Mowdis, Mrs Timms and Williams.
Thank you. Moving on to item 2, to approve the minutes of the ordinary meeting of Council held on the 23rd of November 2022. I move that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of Council held on that date be approved and adopted. Who will second the motion?
I will, Madam Mayor.
Those in favour, please show. Those against, please show. The motion is carried. 3. Declarations of interest. Can I remind members that when they declare interest, they must also declare the general nature of that interest? Are there any declarations under A. Non-pecuniary interests as defined by the Council's Code of Conduct for Councillors? Go ahead, Councillor Robbins.
Yes, item 7A, I think,
Yes.
trustee of Borough and
7B. Thank you. Councillor Gillies.
Item 7A of the agenda as a ward councillor.
Councillor Rabin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Appendix 4, Lotto Good Causes. I'm a director of Help Good Grow in Rugby.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Roodhouse.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As a Warwickshire County Councillor, because I'll be referring to the County Council in the Cabinet Report number 1, Rugby Town Centre Regeneration Strategy.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Willis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Item 7B, a member of Long Lawford Community Association.
Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Under the same agenda, 7B, also a member of Long Lawford Community Association, and I'm also under the Rugby Lotto. I'm the chairman of Lawford United Football Club. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Barbara Brock.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Item 7B, I am chair of Oversight Community Association.
Councillor Livesey.
It's item 5. I have a Ukrainian refugee living with me and my family.
Poole.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Item 7B, member of the Long Lawford Community Association. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Under pecuniary interests, item 3B, pecuniary interests as defined by the Councillors' Code of Conduct. Item 3C, notice under Section 106 Local Government Finance Act 1992, non-payment of community charge or council tax. Thank you, councillors. Moving on to item 4, my announcement as the Mayor. 4A, I was delighted to attend the Rugby Open Art Exhibition at the Rugby Art Gallery and Museum as part of the judging panel last month. The local exhibition has been held since the year 2000 and involves artists submitting examples of their artwork to be judged by a panel, including some industry experts that visited Rugby and joined our judging panel. Those experts then take those selected works forward to a group exhibition, and we were delighted this year that we had approximately 500 entrants from Rugby, which is a first. Really, it is a great number of people, and of course COVID has helped towards that creativity, we're told. But I was most particularly impressed with the standard of the entries submitted by the school's art section and the high standard. So a lot of those young people were awarded prizes. I was unfortunately away, so I couldn't be there myself, and I thank those who have attended, and please encourage those to go and see it. It is a spectacular exhibition. Item 4B, I also recently attended the annual charity event arranged by the Friends of the Hospital of St. Cross to raise vital funds to support the hospital and the community services in Rugby, helping to improve patients' experiences and bring services to the town. The event was very well attended and helped to support the work that the Friends of St. Cross so generously do give, and the trustees. Item 5, questions pursuant to Standing Order 10. Are there any questions, Chief Executive?
Madam Mayor, we have 9 questions this evening. Question A is from Councillor Roodhouse. He submitted a question for the portfolio holder for Operations and Traded Services, Councillor Miss Lawrence, regarding trends in the number of voids.
Are there any supplementary questions?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The answer to the question has been published on our website. Question B is from Councillor Miss Livesey. She submitted a question for the Leader of the Council, Councillor Lowe, regarding communication with Severn Trent since the 28th of September in relation to sewage in the River Avon.
Councillor, do you have any supplementary questions? Thank you. Moving on to item 6A on the agenda.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, I'll keep going.
You keep going, so sorry.
Yes, okay.
Sorry.
Madam Mayor, question C is from Councillor Livesey again. This time it's a question for the portfolio holder for Communities, Homes, Digital and Communications, Councillor Mrs Crane, and it's regarding the number of Ukrainian citizens in Rugby facing homelessness issues and measures to prevent that.
Councillor, do you have any supplementary questions?
Yes, I do. The answer given refers to the number of Ukrainian families who've presented themselves to the council as homeless or for advice on homelessness up to the 23rd of November. My question was actually how many are expected to become homeless, because we now have reached the 6-month initial deadline that Ukrainian refugees were initially expected to stay with families in the UK. And I know from my own experience that the staff working on Ukrainian refugees from the County Council and from Nuneaton and Bedworth Council are particularly worried that a large number of them may be facing homelessness in the coming months. So I'd really like to refer that question back for an answer.
Councillor Crane.
Thank you, Councillor Livesey, and we can come back to you with that, but I would just say in the answer to the question, it does say that, you know, work is ongoing with all the different agencies on this matter. And you may have seen today there was an announcement from DLUC as well about additional funding. So there's obviously the government is, you know, putting money into this, and, you know, I'm sure it will be put towards addressing anyone that is presenting or expected to present as homeless.
Madam Mayor, we have question E from Councillor Srivastava, who submitted a question for the Leader of the Council, Councillor Lowe, asking how many assessments on homes affected by damp and mould have taken place this year, and how many properties in Rugby have mould or damp issues.
Councillor, do you have any supplementary questions?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question F is from Councillor Sanderson. He submitted a question for the Growth and Investment Portfolio holder, Councillor Picker, and is asking what impact the Secretary of State's recent statement relating to planning and house building would have on the Cabinet's decision to move forward with a full review of the Council's local plan.
Councillor Sanderson, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, Madam Mayor. In light of the Secretary of State's response, as stated in this letter, are we not rushing into a review which should otherwise wait until we get a fuller statement?
Thank you for the supplementary. If it's all right with you, Councillor Sanderson, I will come to that later on in the Council's agenda.
Madam Mayor, question G is from Councillor Harrington. He submitted a question for the Leader of the Council, Councillor Lowe, asking if this Council has a list of unlicensed HMOs, and if not, whether it will make it a priority going forwards.
Councillor Harrington, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do. Thank you for the answer. Obviously, I was at the planning meeting regarding HMOs, and currently we've got 193 within Rugby, 117 in Ben Ward, and also with that 61% now. I just want to know what date it was, because I think we've chased this quite a few times, and it seems to be the can's being kicked down the road. And the moment is, I don't understand how planning can make decisions when they haven't got the data. And if you haven't got the data, we can't do this thing. So for me personally, and it's big concern in my ward at the moment. So I suggest we can either get together to get something sorted out, or can we try and find out when this will be done? Because this data is very important, because otherwise at the moment, I think there's actually more than 193 HMOs within Rugby.
Well, thank you, Councillor Harrington, for your question and your supplementary. And without wishing to paraphrase Councillor Picker, one of the main reasons that we feel it might be a good idea to review the local plan is to enable us to put a policy in place specifically around the HMO issue. I would agree with you, it is very serious, and I would agree with you that more to be done, but we need the powers in order to be able to do that.
Madam Mayor, we have a question from Councillor Miss Livesey. She submitted a question for the Leader of the Council, Councillor Lowe, relating to a Severn Trent project to help communities alleviate poverty through the provision of skills and a focus on young people who are not in education, employment or training.
Councillor Livesey, have you a supplementary question?
Madam Mayor, we have a question H from Councillor Slinger. He submitted a question for the Leader of the Council, Councillor Lowe, relating to the procurement of personal protective equipment during the COVID pandemic.
Councillor, have you a supplementary question?
Madam Mayor, and the final question is also from Councillor Slinger. He submitted a question for the Leader of the Council regarding progress on responses to 3 notices of motion submitted by him at Council on the 28th of September.
Councillor, do you have a supplementary question?
I do, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Lowe, for your answer, which I appreciate. Exactly, it's a simple and straightforward answer. I'd be grateful if you could confirm that when notices of motion go to scrutiny committee, you'll keep the proposer of the motion informed about the timelines. And secondly, if you could let me know whether 4 months is on average, the length of time that you would anticipate motions to get reviewed by a scrutiny committee?
Well, Councillor Slinger, thank you for your question. It is, I think, the business of democratic services to keep members informed of what's being discussed at scrutiny committee, or indeed it could be the business of the chair of scrutiny, or indeed it could be the business of the members of your own group who sit on that committee, but I'm sure they will keep you informed. As to the timing on these matters, there has been one ordinary meeting of the scrutiny committee since those notices of motion, and that scrutiny committee was devoted to considering the hugely important issue of the cost of living crisis. This is a massive issue. There are many strands to it. There are many facets to that issue, and therefore that was the totality of the business of that meeting. I hope you will agree with me that, important though these other matters are, I'm afraid they are subordinate to the importance of addressing the cost of living crisis that is affecting the people of Rugby. So it is for that reason that it has gone to the next meeting rather than the one immediately following when they were passed.
Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Moving on to item 6A on the agenda, to receive report of Cabinet dated the 5th of December 2022. In submitting the report of Cabinet, if members wish to raise questions or to comment, will they please indicate they wish to do so when I call the item? Councillor Picker, will you move the confirmation and adoption of item 1 of the report of Cabinet of the 5th of December 2022?
Madam Mayor, I so move and reserve my right to speak.
Paragraph 1, Rugby Town Centre Regeneration Strategy 2022. May I call upon speakers?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, and it's a great pleasure to be able to move this report this evening on the future of our town centre. And before I come to the strategy as a whole, I'm hoping that you might indulge me with a couple of thanks. First, I want to thank everyone who has contributed to the strategy through the consultations, the work we've done both in this chamber, in the working parties we've set up throughout this process, to the residents of the borough who came to the consultations we ran, and of course the businesses who are the lifeblood of the town centre. And I want to be clear that we will continue, as we implement this strategy, to engage with residents and with businesses and with councillors. I also want to thank our Chief Officer for Growth and Investment and the Major Projects and Economic Development team, who, if I could coin a phrase, have quite literally picked up this ball and run with it. And finally, I just want to place on record my thanks to my immediate predecessor in this role, Councillor Jill Simpson-Vince, who I think did more to shape this strategy during the time she held the role. So, thank you. So, the strategy before us is one that's been long in the making, as I've alluded to, but it's one that will deliver for what I hope is our shared vision for the town centre moving forwards. It takes a long-term view of the opportunities and the challenges that town centres here in Rugby and indeed throughout the country and indeed across the world. It looks at a number of key sites that can be redeveloped, both publicly owned and privately owned, and I will come to that in a moment. It's also important to see this in the context of the wider development plans and the clear-eyed view of the future that we have for our town centre. We can't turn back the clock. I remember when I was much younger, walking up and down the high street and going to shops like Woolworths, like Marks and Spencer's. I'll leave it to council's imagination as to which one I enjoyed more. But the truth is, we can't roll the clock back. Town centres have changed. They are changing. They will continue to change. And so we need to look at what the future trends are going to be and what the future shape of town centres is going to be. And it's very clear that future town centres are going to be a mix of retail, primarily independent retail. They're going to be leisure, and they're going to be residential. People are going to come to town centres for an experience, not simply to do their shopping. So that is what we need to encourage, and that's what this strategy will do. We are already seeing some of this shift, and there was a report recently by the Office of National Statistics and the BBC, which looked at some of the changing trends in town centres. And if you put in this postcode, if you look at Rugby, in terms of retail units, we are seeing a similar decline to the national average. But if you look at things like restaurants, and leisure places, you're actually seeing rugby's growing faster than you are elsewhere. And I think that's a trend that we need to encourage, we need to support, and that's part of what this strategy will do. There will be, however, although I've spoken about the long-term nature, there are things that we can do now. There are things that we can do over the coming months and years. But I want to be clear that we can't simply solve the challenges of the town centre with a few short-term gimmicks or an ad hoc approach. We need to take a long-term, serious view as to what is going to be in town centres in the future and what we realistically want to encourage. So the strategy will act as a way of getting greater investment into the town centres from outside parties, not just from the private sector, but from the public sector as well. It'll create a vision that other people can buy into. And I think for all the talk of wanting greater investment in the town centre, you cannot do it without a strategy. No one will want to invest in a town centre unless there is a clear plan. That is what we're setting out today. So the strategy looks at 4 key frameworks on movement, public realm and open space, development and delivery, and each of these will result in their own work streams, and some of those work streams will be coming forwards very, very shortly. So the other thing is we will be looking at tackling our commitments to climate change through this strategy, delivering a sustainable regeneration with more green and open spaces within the town centre. And you can already see some of this coming forward in some of the planning applications that are coming forward at the moment. So this is something that we are beginning now. However, it does acknowledge the real challenges, and I remember at Cabinet, Councillor Mrs O'Rourke asked me what I thought the greatest threats were. Well, the strategy identifies a number of them, and I hope that everyone has read them. But as I said then, the greatest threat we face is that we haven't yet foreseen. So that's why the strategy is so flexible and provides us many opportunities. So over the course of the coming years, we can look at how things change, and we've already seen that change over recent years with the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. Some of the projects we're looking at setting out include a new rugby hub, a revitalised market, and regeneration of the western side of the town at Corporation Street and Every Way, and also going as far down to the station and that entrance to Rugby from there. So it is a huge body of work. We're also looking at the shift towards the mixed use. I've already talked about the leisure, retail and residential, and we're looking at a variety of range of designs, stories, different approaches to what we can bring forward in the town centre, both architecturally and in terms of use. And I just want to be clear again, we know the town faces tremendous challenges. We've discussed that in this chamber on a number of occasions, but they aren't unique to us. You know, Rugby is not somehow uniquely, specifically devastated. It's happening everywhere, and we do need to look at realistically how we can move forward. So that's what this strategy does. It's also worth noting that the strategy identifies the strength and the depth of the town's independent retailers. I know that I'm sure many of you will have enjoyed some of the independent retailers in our town. I hope many of you have, like I, done some Christmas shopping there, or if not, there's still some time. And then, sorry, I've lost my place now. So in terms of meanwhile uses, we are looking at what we can do in the coming months, particularly in terms of the bicentenary of the game of rugby football next year. There's a report shortly on that. Regenerating the marketplace and also celebrating His Majesty the King's coronation next year. So these are all things that we can do in the short term, whilst also looking ahead to the more long term. I spoke briefly about wanting to encourage greater engagement and communication as we go forward with the strategy. And I'm happy to say that I'm already working with officers to bring forward a further business breakfast earlier next year to continue to engage town centre businesses as we take the strategy forward. So the strategy will create a positive story for the town. It's something that we can all look forward to, get behind and seek to invest in. It'll bring forward an outline of proposals for redevelopment both of council land and of private land. It will unlock some of that potential that we all know is there, but we can't do it without adopting the strategy today. So this isn't the end of the process, but it is the beginning of the process. It's something that we can build on and realise our vision, and I hope that we can all adopt it. Thank you.
May I call on any further speakers? Councillor Roodhouse.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I move the amendment which should have been circulated, I believe. I know it went out on SharePoint and it was given to other members as well, and I believe Councillor Mrs O'Rourke has got a friendly amendment. Whether you'd like her to say what that is at the moment.
Can I second and reserve the right?
Thank you, Councillor. We're now debating the amendment only, and I will now call speakers. Councillor, would you please raise your amendment to the amendment?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's a very brief, friendly amendment which I've already shared with the Lib Dems, and it's under number 1. It's in the first sentence, and it's after develop the include viability of work streams.
We're now debating the amended amendments only. Jerry, would you, Councillor Roodhouse?
I'm willing to accept the friendly amendment which has come through. It's about the viability of the work streams. In moving the amendment, can I thank Councillor Picker for his comments, and I too would like to thank Councillor Jill Simpson-Vince, because I know the amount of effort and work that she put into that going through. And likewise, I know the head of growth now had to pick up the ball and run with this in your words. I think as elected members, Madam Mayor, we all arrive in this chamber wanting the best for rugby in the places that elected us to come here. I think we all have that at heart within this as we go through these debates, these two debates really today. And I think there is, there is that common endeavour to get the best for rugby and for the borough about where we're going. The strategy is a consultant's report. I've read a few of those over the years, which has landed. It has got its jargon. Meanwhile is one of those. And parts do make for interesting reading. The conclusion on the report that I make from it, it's to use a phrase called a curate's egg. So it's good in parts and bad in parts from it. And I do have to ask, at the end of this process, was it actually value for money? I'm not going to mention the sum, but you know what the sum is. I know what the sum is. And, I look at the Chief Finance Officer, and I wonder, when I sit at Audit Committee and we're asked that question, is it actually value for money? The proof will be in the eating, as they say. There's some examples which I'd like to turn to. One is paragraph 3.14, which concerns the police station. I don't see any mention about the magistrates' court, and I'll leave others to read that paragraph about the police station and come back to me and tell me, I've read it 3 times, I don't understand it within there. I may have missed it also within the report about Whitehall Recreation Ground, the cycleway connector schemes and the other good stuff that's been going on in the borough as well around the town. And I'm still waiting for clarification around what is actually meant by short-term, medium and long-term. What do we mean by that? And it doesn't seem to take account, or any account, from what I can read, about the emerging LTP, Local Transport Plan number 4. And I'd be interested to know if the portfolio holder could tell me how many in-depth meetings that these consultants had with Warwickshire County Council Highways, and that's why I declared an interest, and what was actually discussed in detail about that and the emerging LTP4. But the most important paragraph of this report that was landed, I believe, is paragraph 4.46. Quite a short one, not very big, but it talks about the governance and accountability and deliverability, which is the whole point that your speech was making, was about deliverability. But in order to deliver it, you need governance and you need accountability to do that. The council is developing a levelling up paper that will form part of a bid into government, and I believe the chief executive is dealing with that paper now. What it contains, I don't know really, because I haven't seen it, and so, you know, I look forward to reading it, presumably at cabinet or full council. Asset management working group has not met since August, so we have no idea what's going on there. But what it does do, and you've alluded to this, Councillor Picker, is that there are a number of work streams and the strategy cannot be delivered by this Borough Council alone. You agree to that, and I think it needs partnership working to do that. And it must be done in, I would say, in an open, transparent and accountable way. No elected member group has met to discuss this strategy in any detail. Scrutiny has totally failed to pick this up and run with it and have a look at it. It hasn't done anything with it at all, and hence the amendment, really, which is just calling for a cross-party board to be set up. Oh, hang on, we could call it the Planning Services Working Party. That hasn't met since June. And I'll come to that when we come to the local plan, because I can read out the terms of reference of what that committee is supposed to do. So we could have a levelling up board, which is actually focused in onto these work streams, and it's actually involving all members of the council, which I'll go back to the beginning, that all members in this chamber, I think, have the best for Rugby and they have the best for the borough. And that's how we should work, and that's how we should take this forward as well, if we're to try and deliver it. The appendix, as I've said to you at the back, with all the listing of the buildings and who owns what and does what, very good, very enjoyable that, because it's the first time I think that's been done. So I congratulate the consultants on that. But actually, if you read through how they, what some of the stuff they're going to achieve, I refer to my previous comments. There's factual inaccuracies about where places are. It misses out stuff. There's further discussion to be had by the people that represent this town and represent this borough, and not consultants, is what we're saying. And in order for these work streams to be delivered in partnership, we need to be able to do that, and that should include all members of this council and not just one party.
Councillor Moran.
Thank you. I liken reading this strategy report to taking a walk on a lovely summer day. First, it's a lovely, healthy idea to go for a walk, to get some fresh air. It's a positive thing to do. And likewise, to seek to review the town centre, street by street, building by building, it's a good thing. Quite why it's taken 20 years to get out of the house, I cannot understand. In your foreword to the report, Councillor Lowe, you correctly state that everyone knows our town centre is not achieving its potential. Now, apologies for being blunt, but can you not see the correlation between the two statements? No strategy for 20 years has directly led to the issues we now face. Anyway, back to the analogy. Getting out for a walk is great in theory. It's exciting to think of adventures and new horizons to be encountered. Except this strategy document is far from exciting. There's no ambition. There's no imagination. Where is the learnt case studies from other towns? If we've had to wait 20 years for this document, at least make it a good one. Councillor Picker, you state in your opening line, Councillor Lowe, you state in your opening line of the report that you took office on the basis of transforming the town centre for the better. At the moment, it's a failure, I'm afraid. Through 162 pages, this strategy can be summarised as more independent retailers, more food and beverage, and more housing, especially affordable. Absolutely good, noble ideas. But that's not a strategy. There's no big idea here at all. None of that fundamentally changes what Rugby Town Centre is about. Because there's nothing behind those statements. They are hollow words. Now, I've worked on countless of these types of strategies, so I'm not about to dismiss this as a consultant's report. But you're failing on all three of the essential items of any good strategy document. The first is, there's no big theme. Councillor Picker, you cannot sell this document to me in a sentence or two. There's no short-term wins, not gimmicks, but no short-term wins to demonstrate credibility and gain traction from the investment and commercial community to show that it's not just a consultant's report. And finally, number 3, to borrow a line from a movie I do love, Jerry Maguire. It says, show me the money, because in this document, there's not a penny. Now, I know Allies and Morrison and Avison Young very well, the 2 consultants behind this report. I was working with them both last year. They're very good, they're professional, but they need inspirational leadership. Now, in Luton, they worked with the council in partnership with major landowners in the town centre, like the company I work for. That council has totally reimagined the town centre. It's gone out and it's bought sites thanks to millions from government. 20 million on one site, adjacent to mine, 119 million across the borough. I've asked this question in this chamber several times and I've yet to have an answer. So for the record, can someone in the party opposite please state categorically what has this council attracted in pure financial terms from Westminster since the 2019 election? Now, in Luton, we're opening up a new river through the heart of the town. It was always there, it was culverted. And Luton has many more challenges than Rugby. The council there is developing a new theatre district, working with the football club to develop a new 23,000-seat stadium. We've captured the people's imagination, and they are genuinely proud of their town. Now, there are some good things in this report, and there's no doubting the diligence of officers to prepare such an important document. Corporation Street is obviously an eyesore for everybody, and it needs to be remedied. But this document needed real collaboration, and on that basis it fails to deliver. There's talk here of developing Cemex House, ignoring the reality of Aldi buying the site some time ago. There's talk of essentially doing away with parking in the town centre. Have you spoken to town centre businesses recently about that? To borrow a line from my favourite Conservative councillor, Councillor Roberts, in the last full council meeting, you gave an academic grade for a report, and you gave me an A, and I do appreciate that. I give this a C-, I'm afraid, because it misses some obvious opportunities, never mind the lack of imagination. Now, let's talk positively. There's talk of encouraging independent businesses. Well, then propose a scheme to encourage entrepreneurs and an investment platform to give them a chance to succeed. What about a business and employment skills programme in collaboration with the college? Or a bursary incentive scheme to help businesses to invest and grow in the town centre? All these are things that are being done elsewhere in the country. For reasons I can't understand, the town centre here is defined as a commercial centre, Rugby School, and then most of Ben Ward and chunks of New Bilton. So areas with acute socio-economic deprivation. But there's no real mention of HMOs. We've declared a climate emergency. But isn't this an opportunity to do something genuinely transformative for the poorest households in the town? Introduce a scheme to upgrade insulation, to affect energy costs. Now, other colleagues will comment on aspects of the documents, but for me, my summary is simply, put this document back on the shelf. For the walk in the park analogy, stay in bed, come up with a more imaginative way to spend a day. You need to study up on what is working elsewhere in the country. Critically, you have to find the money from somewhere. Now, far be it from a Labour politician to tell a Conservative administration this, but the world we face today, your plans need to be couched in commercial reality. Please work with local businesses, and please be truly ambitious, because after 20 years, the town deserves better.
Councillor Douglas.
Thank you very much. Well, it's going to be quite difficult to follow that, but I'll do my best. But I think on a serious note, building on what Councillor Miranda says, you know, Councillor Picker, you say that officers have picked up the ball and ran with it, but it's not evident in the document. You know, I was searching away, I was reading, and I was looking for my favourite word, reading, page 23, looked at culture and heritage, I was trying to find it, and that's tourism. The overall vision of what Councillor Moran is saying about our town. We're not creating a visitor economy, a reason to come here. And I think it was page 62 that it began to talk about the heritage of the game, which I'm very pleased the Leader of the Council has also referred to in a motion later this evening. So I think we're missing a trick. It refers to there's no one event that can celebrate, rugby, but isn't that the point? There's not many cities or towns anywhere in the world that boast such a clear, distinctive, direct link to a unique marketing opportunity. That is fundamentally a town named after a worldwide sport. We're just not embracing it. There's no vision of what we stand for. And I think we need to strengthen this strategy to focus on tourism and a visitor economy. A couple of other points, as Councillor Moran has alluded to, I read through and I jotted down a costings document. Oh, there's lots of wild ambitions in here. Is there a costing document to go through it? As Councillor Roodhouse has alluded to, great minds think alike. When we were comparing notes, I was looking at the transport, a lot of reference to buses. Page 37, health, well-being and economic resilience. And there's a couple of consultations the County Council has done. So it would be good to know and see the responses that the council has submitted to those. And like Councillor Roodhouse, I jotted down how many conversations have we had with the County Council about implementing highways, bus changes, because we've sat in this chamber recently and said, well, we can't have schools where we want them because the County Council won't allow us. So is this strategy, can we implement it if we don't have control over our roads? So I think they're the 3 points that I would like to make. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Lisa Parker.
Thank you. Councillor Douglas, I think a serious slur has occurred. I'm really, really concerned. Because you're an intelligent man. But the game was named after the town. The town was not named after the game. It may have been a slip of the tongue, but there are people all over the borough who, if they heard you tonight, would be extremely offended. Please correct your comments.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any further speakers?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My response to that is there is a lack of ambition. We have ambition. We have spoken about all sorts of opportunities that we've missed over the years in terms of the town centre. We, the Labour group, have brought budgets to this chamber many times, looking at how we could improve public transport, how we could invest in electric buses, how we could have some connectivity between the town centre, the station, how we could improve the air quality for people living in the Ben ward and around the town centre, how we could have had invested in the Gas Street area to have an interchange for our buses and taxis so that the town centre looked better. We've had loads of ideas, but they've always got voted down. Thank you.
Any further speakers? Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We had a little working party not so long ago looking at the public realm, and myself and Councillor Lawrence were having a bit of a laugh and a joke on that. We were sort of saying, do you remember the time we actually nailed Councillor Lowe down to a budget for signage in the town centre and actually put it in a budget, which was quite a shock for us to actually get a straight answer on something. And lo and behold, it went forward and Councillor Lowe became leader of the Conservative group, and all the work of the town centre working party, as was then, was rubbished. Thrown away, dispensed of. We needed this magic spatial strategy to overlook all the things that we've been talking about as a council. Now, whether that was about buying time until resources were available to do something, I do not know. But what we've done is drift from year to year to year to year with no progress. Some of the things that we picked up all those years ago was the poor quality signage in the town centre. There's a terrible notice that links from the Art Gallery Museum into Sheep Street. It's the most awful sign in the world. Please tear it down, burn it, do anything with it, just get rid of it. The need for updating of the dissertation boards to tell people where there are good things to see in Rugby. Good signage. It wasn't that difficult thing. Something we could have done incrementally from existing budgets we used to get from the Elliotsfield redevelopment. But those things were never, ever done. They've just stacked up, not being tackled. Now, there are some good things within this regeneration document. There are some innovative things. And there's some right old loads of rubbish which should never, ever get past highways or a planning inspector. So I think having a board that could reality check this proposal in the spatial strategy document, regeneration strategy, will be a good thing to have, and that board could then hold Cabinet's feet to the fire if it did not progress those tasks. That's why I'm supporting the amendment.
Councillor Roodhouse, would you like a right to reply?
Just a couple of points, really. Councillor Moran and others have mentioned it. I think the key issue around this is not even like the good and the bad and what's the report. As I said, it's a curate's egg of a report, and it depends who reads it and who interprets it. There is general agreement in this chamber that we need a strategy, we need the policies, and we need to do something with it. But I go back to that paragraph which they put in there, and it's quite deliberately there because they know when they wrote it, you can't deliver any of this unless you have clear governance, clear accountability and transparency, and then you bring the money in alongside that to do that. So I'll come back to this particular point, and I would hope that Councillor Picker can see that, and the Conservative leadership can see that actually it's a levelling up board, whatever you want to call it, across party, working on it together. Because actually working together is a better way to get the outcomes within this. And that can only also be done by working in partnership, by pulling on the strengths of this council and not actually dividing it. At the end of the day, I suppose we have to support it, whether we do this or not, really. But, hey, it is what it is. But the serious point about this is actually, do you put the skills of this chamber together into something that makes it deliverable and actually has open debate, which is accountable and governance? Or do you keep it all on one row in front of me and you don't tell anybody else? Or does it come as a report from officers to council or go on blue paper or somewhere else? So it pops out. Actually, nowhere. It dumps. You have your group meeting, you're all told how to vote, you all come to an agreement. You don't, Lisa. You probably come to an agreement, or you go home early, or whatever, but, you have your group meeting, you come to a line. Fair enough, I respect all that. That's how it all works, isn't it? We have group meetings and we agree on particular things. But this is too serious for that. That's the point about this. And that's the whole point, actually. Do you put the skills of this chamber together to deliver it? And I know you've got some really good people sat behind you who could help and work and develop this, and utilising, people that can open doors in other places. Because is it part of the levelling up bid? I don't know. I don't know where we are with that. Can we get the money from the government through that? Surely. I'll just have to look at Nuneaton and Bedworth up the road and see the tricks and games they did. They've got the money, they're getting the money, they're getting the investment. We're not. And that's all this amendment is asking for, really. It doesn't give any power away. You keep all the power, you keep all the control, you chair it. But actually, why don't you use the skills here? Why don't you use Councillor Moran's skills? I know he's Labour, but... But he's got skills, which I haven't got, and others haven't got. You know, it's the same thing. So that's what this amendment is driving at. And that paragraph in that consultant's report, that's why I say it's so important, very small, but actually it's probably the most important paragraph for this council going forward. How do you deliver it? You can either divide, which is the way you're going, or you can actually join and show leadership and bring people together and take us all on that same journey.
Councillor Picker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to everyone who's spoken so far. So I'll just come to the amendment first. As councillors will be aware, we've got the corporate strategy delivery plan. That's how we're monitoring climate change strategy, housing strategy, and it's appropriate that the town centre strategy be monitored in the same way as those. So for those reasons, I don't support the amendment. I do, however, agree that we do need to work together on this and make sure that we're all talking to one another. So it would form part of the corporate strategy delivery plan, which is reported quarterly to council to be discussed. Scrutiny committee would have the ability to call the strategy in, but I would actually be quite happy for this to be a standing item for scrutiny committee every year to look at. And obviously, as we bring more things forward, and we will see things start to happen very swiftly with this plan. As I said, the work streams are due to come forward early next year. On some of the other points that were raised, and I will apologise in advance if I miss anything out, please do get in touch with me and let me know, and I'll come back to anything. In terms of the value for money, you're quite right, it'll be in the results we get, but I'm confident that we will deliver on the ambitions we've set out. So in that sense, it will very much represent value for money. I don't have off the top of my head details about Warwickshire County Council highways, but I will get those to you about the meetings had. In terms of some of the comments Councillor Moran was making in terms of attracting funding, and I think there's a notice of motion later on this, and I suspect we might end up discussing some similar points later on. We obviously, at the moment, we are priority 3 in terms of attracting funding. Now, we are lobbying to try and get that changed, but Councillor Roodhouse made some references to Nuneaton and Bedworth. Obviously, they are classed as a greater area of deprivation, so attract a greater amount of funding. However, I've made no secret of my view that we haven't been proactive enough in attracting funding, and that's why I brought reports to the Council to hire a bid officer to ensure that we are attracting that funding in order to unlock this up. So I think you can't just look at this single strategy in isolation. There's a whole load of work going on, and we will come forward with those proposals. Electric buses, I was actually having a conversation with the Chief Executive about electric buses and the expansion going on there, and we're hoping to have something to bring forward on that shortly, so it is absolutely on our radar, as is the wider transport issue. And, sorry, Councillor Moran, you also referred to... That's a subjective matter. You talked about investing in skills and training. I'm getting a distinct sense of deja vu because last time at Council, I think you raised some issues. I can't remember exactly what they were off the top of my head, but it turns out that those issues were actually in a report from the previous Council meeting relating to the UK Shared Prosperity Funding. Some of the things you've talked about I've already brought to this council through the UK Shared Prosperity Funding, which I can confirm we have received for the coming years. So in terms of things like signage, in terms of skills, opportunities, training, that's in those reports. Thank you.
We shall now put the amended amendment to the vote. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. All those against, please show. The amendment is defeated. We now move to the substantive motion. Councillor Picker. Any speakers?
With the Mayor's casting vote, that's 19 for, 18 against.
Any other speakers? Councillor Lowe.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. Moving to the substantive motion, I will say a few words, if I may, and it's a privilege to be able to speak on this matter this evening. And I think we've seen from numerous comments in the public and indeed tonight that if there's one thing that unites everyone in this town, it's a desire to see our town centre do better. And whilst our town centre does have a great many strengths, I think we would all agree that there is much that can be improved. As Councillor Picker's already said, the problems that we face in our town centre are very far from being unique. Indeed, they're the same problems that face the centres of towns of our size up and down the country. The town centre of the past was built on retail, and therefore, as shopping moves online and out of town, town centres built on retail will cease to thrive. We know this, and we know this is what has happened in Rugby. However, whilst the problems that we have are far from unusual, it has long been my belief that we have a number of key advantages in terms of connectivity, in terms of the scale of our growth, in terms of the strength of our local economy. And this strategy is about giving us the tools we need to make the most of those advantages. Now, I'm sorry that there are people here who feel this has not been ambitious enough. I question perhaps whether everyone has fully read the strategy or indeed fully understood the purpose of this document. It is no exaggeration to say that this offers us a once-in-a-generation, if not once-in-a-century, opportunity to deliver a truly transformative regeneration programme for our town centre. Now, a thriving town centre, as it says in the document, is one which blends a variety of uses to create a destination. We will still have retail, but it'll be much more along the lines of the sort of independent retailers that we currently have in Regent Quarter. But we will also look to significantly increase the range of bars, restaurants, places of entertainment. And most excitingly of all, we will look to significantly increase the number of quality, desirable and affordable homes in our town centre. Something which will not only generate much needed footfall to drive the growth of town centre businesses, but will also go some way towards addressing our housing needs. As I said, this is a once-in-a-century opportunity, and it is therefore vital that we get it right. It is my firm belief that this strategy offers a much-needed and comprehensive solution to the issues that our town centre faces, and the adoption of this strategy will give us the investment prospectus we need to help us secure public and private sector funding to drive this regeneration forward. This is a vitally important step on our journey. It will set the ball rolling for genuine transformation of the centre of Rugby on a scale which has never been seen before. And I hope that members of all parties will put politics aside and join me in voting for the adoption of this strategy. And my final comment, Madam Mayor, is this. There have been, as there often are, rumblings about yet more talking shops, yet more consultations, yet more reports. Well, from the town centre businesses and from the residents that I speak to, there is a very consistent, very loud and very clear message that the time for talking is over. It is time for us to do something. And so I urge everyone here tonight to get behind this strategy so we can get on with it.
Councillor Picker, will you move the confirmation and adoption of item 2 of the report of Cabinet of the 5th of December 2022?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I so move.
Paragraph 2. Oh, we're not voting now.
Madam Mayor, we'll take a vote once we've gone through all the reports for Cabinet at the end.
Moving on. Thank you, councillors. We have a long agenda, so I'll push on. Paragraph 2, local plan review. Amendment to be proposed by Councillor Roodhouse.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I move the amendment which has been circulated in regard to this particular matter?
Who will second?
I will, Madam Mayor, and I'll reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Do you want to go ahead?
Councillor Picker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Local plan reviews, they're always massively popular, and I'm fully aware that I'm going to be a beacon of optimism and hope for bringing this forward. Look, the truth is we're required to conduct a local plan review as part of our statutory duty every 5 years. The decision before us this evening is whether we want to go for a full review or a partial review, and on what timescale. Now, I've considered the options and discussed what we can do with our officers, and my view is that we should move forward with a full review of the local plan, and I can absolutely assure you that isn't a decision I arrived at lightly. I didn't just wake up one morning and decide, oh, you know what will be fun, let's have a review of the local plan. Councillors will recall that alongside other Warwickshire councils, we conducted a review of housing and employment needs assessment. This forms an evidence basis, and that evidence basis is obviously out there. It's been done by ICENI and reflects the challenges that we've got regarding housing, and more specifically in Rugby's case, in employment land. However, I do want to be very clear, as I was at Cabinet, this is a piece of evidence. It is open for debate and discussion, and that's what I hope we can have as we move forward with a local plan review. So I do want to, and I will essentially be speaking to the amendment at this stage, Councillor Roodhouse and Councillor Ms O'Rourke. Why do I think that what we need to do is have a full review of the local plan? Well, the current local plan has just over 8 years left to run. It comes to its conclusion on the 31st of March 2031. If we proceed with a plan update, we'll need to update the plan's strategic policies for a longer horizon, and that includes our housing and employment need. National policy says that these strategic policies must look ahead for at least 15 years from a plan's adoption. This applies irrespective of whether we do a full review or a partial review. So much of the cost of the local plan, I know this is something that's been commented on elsewhere, is in commissioning evidence to support these strategic decisions. Now, again, that evidence will need to be commissioned whether it's a full review or a partial review, and it may include greenbelt reviews, again, whether it's partial or a full review, because what we're doing is looking at those policies and ensuring that they're up to date. That will require evidence. The cost saving that will be made by restricting the review to only some of the policies will be minimal, because the most important policies relating to employment and housing needs would be included in either review. In the long term, what we would do if we did a partial review is essentially save money now to spend more money later, because we'd still end up having to do a full review just on a slightly delayed timescale. So for those reasons, I don't agree that we should be doing a partial review. I think it's a false economy. So in terms of the timing, the process will take time, whether we, again, regardless of what we do. And the biggest threat to where we don't want speculative development is by having the local plan be judged to be out of date. It's not a short-term process. The last one took several years, and the local development scheme we've published allows for 3 years for that process, which is a realistic process. That means that we should ensure that we don't have much of an out-of-date local plan, and we're therefore able to retain control of the planning scheme in Rugby. It'll be more than 5 years post-adoption as of the 4th of June 2024, and if we're outside of that window, we risk increasing speculative employment land coming forward. So delaying this decision isn't actually going to help in the long term. So what we want to do is bring forward new policies to support the town centre regeneration, to address some of the issues that have been raised in this chamber and were raised earlier on by Councillor Harrington regarding HMO policy and responding to the climate crisis. These are all things that we're agreed on in this chamber, but we need a review of the local plan to take it forward. The other thing that we would risk is if we fall behind our neighbouring authorities, and I think that's what's been missed in some of the commentary, our other Warwickshire authorities are also moving forward with their local plan review. Now, if we all move together, not only could we save money as far as jointly commissioning the evidence, it would also mean that all of those plans would be looked at together, or not together, they'd be assessed independently, but each of them would be looking at the same evidence base, and that would make each of them stronger when being looked at. So those are the reasons why I think we should move for a full review and why we should move now. What I also want to comment on is we're not fixing our housing and employment numbers tonight. That's not what we're deciding. Those numbers will be up for discussion, up for review. We will examine those evidence. I gave Councillor Roodhouse a commitment at Cabinet that we would get Iceni in here for either a members' conversation or to talk to Planning Services Working Party to assess and interrogate those numbers. I'm happy to give that commitment again this evening. So, as I said at Cabinet, and I'm not going to repeat what I said at Cabinet, this should be an evolutionary, not revolutionary, local plan review. We should look at where it's working, where it isn't working, and bring forward policies to address those. So, for those reasons, I think we should move forward with the local plan review as the recommendation from Cabinet. Thank you.
Councillor Roodhouse.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm moving the amendment as printed. Can I thank Councillor Picker for those comments? Makes no surprise where he's at and that we're staying down this particular route, but hey, we've got to give it a try, haven't we? And go for there. We're moving for a partial review at this point in time, and I'll leave others to go into the details around that. The particular points around this are, if we look at the Planning Services Working Party, what was it actually set up to do? In fact, if you look at the terms of reference, 2012 was the local plan and the local plan review, and to bring documents along and documents along the way. So why hasn't it met since June? Why weren't these documents brought into the Planning Services Working Party in between? Have they just suddenly popped out of nowhere? Has all this work just suddenly popped out and come along? You know, you haven't involved anybody else in this. It's all been your decisions. It's landed through into Cabinet and then to here. You know, so why weren't Planning Services Working Party involved? Terms of reference are quite clear what it was set up to do. And I find that, you know, quite amazing, really. I'm also reminded of a fable. Some of you will know about the tortoise and the hare. You know, the hare lost, but the tortoise won. Sometimes it's quite, you know, you do need to go a bit slower and take on board. It reminds me that Councillor Picker and the front bench there are probably out on the motorway hurtling at 90 miles an hour with the local plan papers and everything flying out the windows and, whoa, we're on the way. We're going to have a new factory up the road. We're going to have all these houses, this affordable homes, and whoa, HMOs is solved, and this, that, and the other. You know, whoa, the flags. All us lot are still trying to find the motorway to get on it to find out what the heck's going on. So I recognise you're saying there's going to be debate, and there will be a debate, a very strong debate about the housing numbers and exactly what this is going to look and shape like, because I know where the votes are going to come from, so I might as well say it now. But, you know, there will be a strong, robust debate around this, and especially about where that building and what sort of building. And the interesting point from the Iceni report is actually around the type of housing My colleague, Councillor Douglas, may refer to it later about bungalows, for instance, which we had a discussion in the group meeting about. But also there is a question about supported housing, affordable housing, what type of housing to be had and how many that will be. And that will be a robust debate about what that means. And sheltered housing. We've got, you know, if you look at the census figures for Warwickshire, our older population is getting older, our younger population is not growing. And quite clearly, there's something we need to take account of from those census figures that have just come through to us. It is a really important issue. So, even if all the votes go your one way, please reinvigorate the Planning Services Working Party, which has not met since June. I don't understand why none of this ever came to that. And I hope you can provide me with an explanation, because I think that's just not on, really. It's not the way that you should do business. If you want to do business and try and bring this council along with you and the opposition parties, or perhaps you just don't want us here, well, you probably don't actually, but there you go. That, you know, if you don't want that and you don't want to give us the knowledge or any of that, fine, just carry on as you are, because I might as well pack me bags now and go. Yeah, what's the point in having councillors if you, as the front bench, just want to sit there, bring stuff into cabinet and bring it onto council and get everybody else to just vote in line with it in your group? What's the point? And I think that's what this issue is also about as it starts to develop and going forward as we move into that debate. Again, the Icena report is a long, in-depth report. And I'm glad you've given those assurances that they will come here. Nuneaton and Bedworth actually did a focus on Nuneaton and Bedworth, didn't they? I believe that's right.
Councillors, to order, please.
I believe that's right, and that's what happened at Nuneaton and Bedworth, and they actually took that particular route. It's a route which I think, dare I say, about Nuneaton and Bedworth is probably the right one, to look at rugby and to actually do that particular work and have that conversations about it. So I'll move the amendment, Madam Mayor, and I know others will come in about the actual bits about partial review and full-time review, and I'm sure that discussion will rumble on. But those are the points I want to make tonight about this, because it's the second time I really stood here and said, what's the point of councillors? And I think that's the more serious point that underlines this agenda tonight.
Councillors, may I just say, in the spirit of lively debate, just some respect in the chamber for our constituents as well and the fellow councillors alike, whilst we web stream this. Councillor Lisa Parker.
Well, Councillor Roodhouse, I know you have a better memory than you've displayed tonight. I know that you remember that hot night in the Ben Hall. I know that you remember that councillors were not whipped into voting. Trust me, nobody whips me. Chance would be a fine thing. But enough on that. Let's leave that for another night, maybe Friday night. It is an insult to say that we're not needed. It is an insult to say that we stand behind the 6 people in the front benches and we do what they say. No, no, no. We do what we've always done. I've got 16 years of being an awkward bugger, and I have no intention of allowing the 6 people on the front bench to tell me what I think is right for this borough and its growth. So please think back to that hot night on this cold one. Thank you.
Councillor O'Rourke.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to respond to the last speaker. I don't dispute that you are your own person and that you have a mind of your own and you're not going to be controlled by anybody. I think we all absolutely see that in you. However, what the problem for us is, and it runs through this agenda throughout the night, we are being excluded. This council has gone to a point where we're being excluded. We have a committee to discuss these things that, as Councillor Roodhouse has already said, and you think it's okay to just drop things on us at the last minute. Several reports tonight have come at the last minute, so we haven't got proper time to look at them and discuss them and study them. And you think it's okay. That's not inclusive leadership. That's not going to do the best for rugby. We've already said there's a lot of skills in this chamber, but you just seem to refuse to actually engage with us. I phoned you up twice this week and sent you emails, and I've had no response, Councillor Lowe. None at all. I've got my emails. I'm happy to show them to anybody. The fact is, at the end of the day, this goes to the fundamental question of democracy. We are elected members as well, and we have a right to be involved and challenge the administration, and we will challenge them. But we have a committee, we have a working group that should have been involved in this. What's the problem in involving us in it? And so we haven't got in here tonight and feel all really fed up and thinking, like Councillor Roodhouse does, what's the point? I can tell you, when we take over next May, we will be inclusive and we will allow you to ask questions, move notice of motions and challenge us, because we are happy to be accountable for the decisions that we make. And we will listen to the people of Rugby. We'll invite them into the council chamber to ask questions. It will be open and transparent. This is fundamentally the problem for us with this process, the fact that you're not involved us.
Any further speakers? Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would ask members to look at what the amendment asks for, which is a partial review of the local plan. Now, some of us do not consider that the existing local plan is in fact complete. There is no policy on gypsies and travellers. There is no policy on houses in multiple occupation. And one of the other agenda items today mentions Brandon Stadium. Well, there's no policy on stadiums, for example. The work was incomplete on the other, and at that time, we didn't even have an up-to-date local transport plan, which the council, I believe, won't be finishing until about September of this year. So we've got lots of things that we've still outstanding on the existing local plan that should have been dealt with since June and has not been dealt with since June. So if the things that got behind, you can only blame yourself for that, because you are the cabinet members, you lead the working parties. In terms of the other thing that worries me in the first line was we're very concerned about the green belt. The reason why we're concerned about the green belt is because when we called for sites on the first local plan, we were inundated, overwhelmed, smothered with farmers wanting to sell off their land to developers. Most of it was in the green belt, most of it was in the open countryside, most of it would have infilled Rugby from here to Southam. Now, if you want that door opened again, you want that Pandora's to come onto your desk, fine. But it'll take you about 3 or 4 years to get it completed. So please, look at policies that are outstanding, look at policies that can be achieved, look at policies where we could partially start a review, and then we will wait to see what Mr Gove comes up with. Because there's bound to be some right corkers in that. We know what Mr Gove is like.
Can we close the...
Yeah.
I get your argument. We haven't got much time, and I'd like
Can
the
I
other
thank
speaker...
you, Madam Mayor?
Thank you.
That's my concern, that you will open that Pandora's box you wished you had never opened.
Councillor Moran.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. First of all, I definitely do read every word of a report. And actually in the report, the Town Centre Review Strategy, it does make explicit reference to there not being a pending review of the local plan. So it would help if you could get your reports together. But I know, Councillor Picker, I never doubt your intention. You're a keen trier. But equally, just to recall, Councillor Lowe, something you said at the outset of this meeting, and I agreed with you wholeheartedly. In response to my colleague Councillor Slinger, in reference to feedback on notices of motion, you very correctly acknowledged that we're in an unprecedented time of economic challenge. It's a crisis. We won't get into how and why the crisis has emerged, but there's an economic crisis now. And for that simple reason, to go headlong into this full review now, at this point, is absolute madness. It beggars belief. For this type of thing, I consider myself a poacher turned gamekeeper. My job is looking at sites. If there was a league table of local authorities for the status of a local plan, it's one of the few occasions Rugby would be competing for silverware. So unlike attracting funding from Westminster, where Councillor Picker acknowledges there are serious deficiencies, in preparing an up-to-date local plan, collectively, you're smashing it out of the park. The current 5-year housing supply at 6.25 years, which includes a 5% buffer, is very healthy. The strong record of delivery of homes, 155% of the housing need being delivered in the last 3 years, is fantastic. A partial review of key policy areas would be the most sensible approach. HMOs, climate change, gypsies and travellers, etc. The evidence base needed to back up a partial review will be much less expensive. And that comes back to this cost of living crisis. Councillor Roodhouse, you teased us with knowing the cost of the town centre strategy. At least some of the figures here are published. It's eye-watering. I know it's eye-watering. I know how much these things cost. We also talk about practical experience in these areas. If we open Pandora's box, was the phrase here, to an update of the local plan, it will initiate a dragon's den, a call to arms of every developer to engage professional consultants to find ways around our protectionist policies. Most critically, the green belt. It also sends out a sign of weakness. It's a public statement that we are insecure of our current plan and that it needs updating. It puts neighbourhoods and villages on high alert when there is no need. We are in unprecedented times. Having a local plan 3.5 years old, spanning the pandemic, puts Rugby in a very strong position. But fundamentally here, we don't need more houses in the borough at the moment. Rugby is doing its bit. National requirements are being met. At some point, doesn't the debate turn to the quality of life? We already know that our public services are swamped, how difficult it is to get a doctor or a dentist. Surely the time now is to focus on making that better. And lastly, the timing. Not just the economic crisis, but the timing generally is bizarre. Michael Gove, who some in here will love, will set out a new national planning policy framework imminently. That's going to have a big impact on these plans. It's therefore just common sense to hold fire. Focus on articulating what policies need updating and spending money more prudently. Plenty of other local authorities are taking similar partial update routes from much weaker positions. So please, let's be smart, protect the green belt and save hundreds of thousands of pounds.
Councillor Roodhouse, have you any reply?
Madam Mayor, in the spirit of Christmas, thank you, Councillor Parker. I do remember that very hot night with the fans and everything else, and how Councillor Lowe voted and others, and the discussions that all went on at that point. The serious point, again, I was making really at the beginning was about things like the Planning Services Working Party and all those particular points. You know, and it is a point, actually, you have all these elected members here and the way you want to go. Councillor Moran has put forward the particular position over the facts and figures over this, and I do think we are moving into uncharted waters by going for a full review.
Councillor Picker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Right, so I set out in my opening remarks why I think we should be going for a full review. Now, in terms of sort of transparency and openness, we're obviously here this evening debating this. We've put strong arguments forward on both sides, and ultimately each one of us is going to have to come to a decision on what we think is the best approach. So I do think that is open. We've brought this report forward. We're discussing it this evening. In terms of the numbers, lots of talk was just given about housing, nothing about employment, and that's what the HEDNA, what the Iceni figures show is a potential issue with employment land. In terms of housing, as we've just discussed with the local plan, the town centre strategy review, there is the opportunity to deliver additional housing in the town centre through that regeneration scheme. And shockingly, I'm going to agree with Councillor Moran. Rugby is doing its bit to deliver new housing. It is doing its bit to far beyond the national average at places like Holton and elsewhere in the borough. We are delivering houses. This is not about new housing. That's not what it says in the report. That's not what it says in the HEDNA figures. It's about employment land and ensuring that we have the ability to diversify our economy, to deliver more manufacturing, to deliver more growth in those sectors. That used to be what the Labour Party was about. That's what this report is about. You've also correctly, Councillor Sanderson, identified some issues with the local plan. I agree with you. That's why I'm recommending we review it and why we use that to bring these policies forward. So for those reasons, and I'm sure we will continue this discussion, and we will continue this discussion as we move forward, but I've set out why I believe this is the right approach to take. You can agree with me, you can disagree with me, but that's the debate we're having this evening.
Thank you, councillors. So we've drawn that to a conclusion, and I shall now put the amendment to the vote. Those in favour, please show, and we will count. Those against, please show. The amendment is defeated. We now move to the substantive motion. Councillor Picker, do you have any reply? Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will speak very briefly, if I may, and if you'll indulge me, I will just address some of the points that were just spoken about a few moments ago around the amendment. It would be fair to say, certainly some of what was said was actually something I had a little bit of sympathy for. I think it is right and it is proper that we should look to protect our greenbelt land. And it's in no small part for this reason that the town centre regeneration strategy we debated a few moments ago places enormous emphasis on the importance of developing derelict brownfield sites. As I think we should all acknowledge, there is a crisis in housing and that crisis needs to be addressed. So it is vital that we do so by making the most of currently unused land in our town centre as part of the regen strategy that we spoke about a moment ago. Now, moving to the substantive motion, most of us here know local plans are a long time in the making. Indeed, the previous local plan, I think, was with Councillor Heather Timms for a while as portfolio holder. Then I had it for a year as portfolio holder. Then Councillor Simpson-Vince was portfolio holder when it was finally adopted. It takes a long time. So despite some of the rhetoric that we've heard around this matter tonight, what we're talking about now is a very routine and very straightforward measure. If we do not have an up-to-date local plan, then this borough will be a free-for-all for developers with almost zero protection against speculative development of any kind. So I hope, therefore, that we can all acknowledge that it is inconceivable that we do not have an up-to-date local plan. I'd like to pick up on Councillor Picker's excellent points that the next local plan will be very different in character from the previous local plan. It's not going to be about housing numbers. It is about employment land, and something which I'm sure you would agree, Councillor Moran, in the current economic situation is precisely something that we should be doing for the benefit of our residents. I'd also like to touch on the issue of HMOs, and I alluded to this before. It's been repeatedly and I think entirely legitimately raised by the Labour group in this chamber. There is an issue with HMOs, and as part of the local plan there will be a comprehensive policy with respect to HMOs, ensuring that the impact they have on the broader locality is sensitively and appropriately managed. So with this in mind, having repeatedly asked about this issue, I struggle to see why the Labour group are not enthusiastic backers of this review. And finally, I'm going to touch on the question which Councillor Picker has already addressed, of whether we should conduct a full or a partial review. Now, the difference in costs between a full and a partial review is relatively small. Local plans are expensive, as many people have said already, and a partial review costs a huge amount in the same way a full review does. And needless to say, should we conduct a partial review, we would only then need to conduct a full review a couple of years down the line, incurring more cost once again. So as I say, despite the rhetoric and perhaps, dare I say it, the hysteria that some might choose to apply to this issue, tonight's measure is very straightforward and very necessary procedural matter. And to conclude, I suppose my final observation would be this, that a number of those who are opposed to this full local plan review are those who oppose the current local plan. And I cannot be the only person who sees something of a disconnect here. Surely, if you object to the local plan as it currently stands, then the sensible thing is to vote for it to be reviewed. And if you believe there are issues concerning the increased number of HMOs in Rugby, then again, surely the sensible thing is to vote for a full review so appropriate policies can be put in place. If you believe there are question marks around affordable housing targets, again, surely the sensible thing is to vote for a full review of the local plan. I could go on, the list is endless, but clearly there are questions from many people in this room around the current local plan, and therefore I do not understand why there is not broad support for a review of that local plan. Now, I'm absolutely certain that we will have some very lively debate over the nature of the local plan as it emerges, and that's absolutely healthy and a necessary part of a functioning democracy. But all we're talking about here tonight is whether we should get that ball rolling on that debate. And we believe that we should get that ball rolling and that it would be irresponsible to do otherwise. And therefore, we will be voting for a full review this evening.
Thank you, Councillor. Moving on to the next item, Councillor Roberts. Will you move the confirmation and adoption of item 3 of the report of Cabinet of the 5th of December 2002? Councillor Lowe, I'm sorry, you're going to be...
Yes, Madam Mayor, I so move.
Thank you. Paragraph 3, Bicentenary of Rugby Union 1823 to 2023.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. It's been a very long night, so I'm happy to say I'm going to be very brief. I'm very happy to move this report this evening, as I did in Cabinet at the start of the month. Clearly, as has already been said, the bicentenary of the sport of rugby is an enormous milestone in the history of our town, and whether people are fans of the sport that bears the name of the town or not, clearly it forms an enormous part of our heritage and history. So it's therefore entirely appropriate that we look to commemorate this event in a wide and inclusive manner, and so it gives me great pleasure to move this report that suggests that we do so.
Any further speakers? Councillor Douglas is on his feet.
Well, thank you very much. I suppose it wouldn't surprise you that I'm going to speak on this. And again, I'll be brief, and I think it's welcome, certainly welcome. It's a historic moment, so certainly welcome the measures set out in the report. The report focus is on schools as well, young people and our local clubs, and I think that is vitally important. And I think all that is to say is that I hope it forms a catalyst for regular activity, and we're not waiting another 100 years for the leader of the council to say he's a rugby fan. But of course, as I've said in the previous debate, we have a global product, a global brand that I think we should be doing more to create rugby as a real tourism and visitor attraction, a real tourism town. And finally, maybe I could seek some assurances from the leader. We've not only got the 100 years, the bicentenary next year, there's also the Rugby Union World Cup. So perhaps we could extend an invitation to the winners of that tournament when they're perhaps touring the UK, as many of the countries do in the autumn, and there's also international games happening next summer, including the Barbarians are playing a World 15 as well. And I think only 50 minutes on a train, as we've talked about, our connectivity to the town centre, we need to be, you know, embracing these touring teams, getting them into our local clubs and schools, which I'm sure they'd be pleased to do, as Eddie Jones did very much so in his tenure as the England Rugby Union coach. So hopefully I can seek those assurances and we can get some international teams to the town and bring some publicity and visitors. Thank you.
Lilo.
Thank you. Well, I'm happy to give you the assurance that there will be a report about the Rugby World Cup coming in due course, in actually quite in the not too distant future. I'm afraid it is above my pay grade to confirm whether international rugby teams will commit to visiting this town, but I can confirm that we will ask them to, Councillor Douglas. Whether they come or not is, of course, a matter for them. But yes, I am happy to give you the assurance that you're seeking. I think that was the only matter, wasn't it? Yeah. Right. It's 48 minutes, not 50. There you go.
Thank you, councillors. Moving on to the next item. Councillor Miss Robbins, will you move the confirmation and adoption of item 4 of the report of Cabinet on the 5th of December 2022?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I so move.
Paragraph 4, Finance and Performance Monitoring 2022 to 2023, as at 30th of September 2022. May I call on any speakers? Councillor Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Nothing further to say on this particular report at this time. Obviously, as we move into budget setting, there will be more information coming forward.
Thank you. I now submit for confirmation and adoption the whole of that report. Those in favour, please show. Those against, please show. The motion is carried. Item 7 on the agenda, to receive the report of officers. The next item is to receive the report of the Chief Officer for Growth and Investment, set out at item 7A of the agenda. The report concerns the adoption of the Brinklow Neighbourhood Development Plan and Decision Statement. Councillor Picker, will you move the report?
Madam Mayor, I so move.
Who will second the motion?
I will, Madam Mayor, and reserve my right to speak.
Councillor Picker.
Right, I'm sure I've got another lengthy speech here somewhere. No, I'm going to be brief on this one. I'd just like to thank all those who've involved themselves in the Brinklow Neighbourhood Plan. They're an important part of our overall development strategy, and I move the report as written.
We're going to go straight into the vote. Those in favour, please show. Those against, please show. The motion is carried. The next item is to receive the report of the Chief Officer, Communities and Homes, set out at item 7B of the agenda. The report concerns a review of the Council's support for the voluntary and community sector in Rugby. Councillor Mrs Crane, will you move the report?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I so move.
Who will second the motion? I call upon Speaker Bill Lewis. You're on your feet.
Yeah, it's just a matter that I should really have declared a non-pecuniary interest in this item because of my position as Chair of Hillside Rugby Community Association and Chair of Rugby Bearboards Trust.
Thank you,
I apologise
Councillor.
for not making that at the appropriate time. Thank you.
That's noted. Thank you. Councillor Mrs Crane.
Thank you. This report sets out the funding proposals for the voluntary and community sector for the next financial year, and it follows a comprehensive review which involved working closely with Warwickshire CAVA to understand what's needed to best support our community and voluntary associations. And I want to thank officers for the work that they've done on this over the last few months. The Council is committed to continuing to provide significant support for our voluntary and community sector, who really do a fantastic job of helping and supporting our most vulnerable residents. And Rugby doesn't just provide support through direct financial contributions, but also through things like giving a peppercorn rent on the retreat to the food bank, or through our partnership working. And the report sets out some of the changes we're proposing to most effectively support and enable the sector over the coming year. And I just want to draw attention to some of them that are in there. I'm sure everyone's read it, but I just wanted to highlight some of them. We're going to continue to fund the SLAs for our community associations. They do such fantastic work, and officers are going to work with them to develop bespoke action plans to deliver outcomes. And we're going to increase the funding of the Rugby Food Bank from £2,000 to £8,000 in recognition of the current pressures that they're facing with increases in demand. And we're going to increase the funding going to CAVA for their work to support and help the sector with capacity building and accessing funding. And we're going to be continuing to support citizens' advice and hoping that they'll be able to relocate to the town hall, which will allow for greater partnership working and also help to reduce overheads. And some members may question the decision to replace the one-off community grants with a reserve of £15,000 to fund projects that aren't able to attract alternative funding and which will support the achievement of the corporate strategy. But I just wanted to stress that we took this decision based on the evidence from the review and after weighing up how the Council could most effectively support the sector. And in particular, the community grants in recent years have been undersubscribed in spite of various changes to processes and systems over the years to try and increase the uptake and access. And secondly, the results of the review showed that the challenges facing the sector are particularly around lack of revenue for day-to-day running costs and also lack of volunteers. And those weren't things that the community grants can actually help with because the grants were for particular projects. We've also launched the Rugby Lotto, which has been a great initiative for the sector, as it does provide them with that additional income, which they can use in whichever way they wish, and it's not restricted in the same way that the grants are. And we know that many of the organisations have shifted to the Lotto, and it's raised over 120,000. And finally, there are lots of other alternative options available to help organisations, and CAVA's working with them to help them access these opportunities and to help the organisations to be more resilient. Altogether, this package is a balanced package of support for the sector of £180,000, which will best help them to tackle some of the challenges they face and continue to support our communities here in Rugby. And I hope members will support this proposal.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further speakers? Councillor Douglas.
Thank you. It was just a brief observation following reading the report, and I think Councillor Crane, you've highlighted the money that the Lotto raises, and I do note in the report that there will be a new plan, I believe, in the new year to promote it, because I think it's vital that we do more. So just a question as to whether there's an opportunity for councillors to be involved in that process and look at the mechanisms of how we can promote the Lotto, wider in the community and generate more money.
Any further speakers? Councillor Livesey.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I was really disappointed to see that Coton Park Residents Association isn't able to avail itself of any of the support funds from the council, presumably because of the way it's constituted. But that was a bit of a disappointment for me as a local councillor for that area.
Councillor Crane.
Thank you. In response to Councillor Douglas, yes, absolutely be happy to work with you on that. I think any publicity that we can make about it and get organisations involved and signed up to the Lotto would be most welcome.
Thank you, Councillor. Right, we're going to vote on that. Those in favour, please show. Those against, please show. The motion is carried. The next... Councillors Mrs Parker and Rayburn. Would you like to, by virtue of your interest, just step outside of the room? Sorry, the next item is 7C, to receive the report of the Chief Officer, Communities and Homes, set out at item C of the agenda. The report concerns the council tax reduction scheme for 2023-2024. Councillor Mrs Crane, will you move this report?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I so move.
Who will second the motion?
I will, Madam Mayor, and reserve my right to speak.
Any further speakers? Councillor Crane.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't intend to say much about this report. It's basically recommending the annual provision of a local council tax reduction scheme. It's a statutory requirement, and we're essentially just adopting the same scheme that we've got in place at the moment. And it will obviously provide valuable support for people that need it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So we'll eventually move on to item 7D. Oh, sorry, we have to vote on that, won't we, Councillor? Those in favour, please show. Those against, please show. The motion is carried. Moving on to item 7D. Councillors Parker and Councillors Rabin, would you mind stepping outside the room for this slight deferment, but we still need you to leave. So the next item is to receive the report of the Chief Officer, Legal and Governance, set out at item 7D of the agenda. The report concerns the appointment of directors to Rugby First. Councillor Miss Robbins, will you move the report?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I so move.
Who will second the motion?
I'm not going to second it, Madam Mayor. I'm asking for deferral of this item.
I'll second it, then Councillor Roodhouse can ask for his deferral.
In light of the reports that we're still waiting for on Rugby First and the rest of it, I think this item should be deferred from this agenda tonight.
May I have a seconder to the deferment? Thank you, Councillor Mahoney. We'll take a vote on that now. Those in favour, please show. Those against, please show. The motion is carried. Can we call the councillors back in? Thank you. The next item is to receive the report of the Chief Officer, Legal and Governance, set out at item 7E of the agenda. The report concerns proposed updates to the Council's constitution. Councillor Miss Robbins, will you move the report? I'll just wait for the councillors to enter the room again.
Madam Mayor, I so move the report.
Again, Madam Mayor, can I...
Can we just pause for the councillors
I'm
to
asking for
re-enter?
deferral of this item from this agenda tonight.
Who will second that?
I will, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
And it's to go to the next leaders' meeting for discussion.
We shall now vote on the deferment of that motion. Those in favour of the deferment, please show. Those against, please show. The motion is deferred. Is it? Do we raise a count again? Can you hold your hands up? Sorry. Okay. Count. Okay. So the item's not deferred, so we're moving to debate on the item. We're now moving to debate. We'll continue with this item. There's any speakers? Councillor Roodhouse.
Yeah, the reason for deferment is that I don't think the Working Party was effective enough in the way that it communicated back to all groups in relation to that, to the work that's gone on here. Also, I think there should be more time allowed for debate, and I think the leaders of each of the political groups need a discussion around a particular subject. I can understand why one group may want to go down this particular route, but I think it is worth actually going through that. We don't have to rush at it, and we could actually then bring it back into this council for some further discussion. along those items. I think it does beg the question actually about working groups and how they report back into the particular workings that are going on around with other elected members as well. So I do think there's some further work needed on this, as we go forward. And as I say, there's no need to rush at it at this particular point. I think it's about getting it right and getting it right at the first time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Robbins.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Right, reporting back. Well, I can tell you, Madam Mayor, that I reported back to my group. There were 3 of us on the working party. It is not down to this group to report back to the other 2 groups. That is down to the other 2 members. If they didn't report back to their own groups, then I'm afraid then they need to look to how their members report back to them. As far as I'm concerned, this was a properly constituted review. It was overseen by Aftab Razak, and it was the conclusions we came to were agreed by all 3 members of that group. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Slinger.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I'm sure the Working Party briefing group did its work with a well-intentioned, in a well-intentioned way. And it does, thankfully, the document does thankfully refer to it being, quote, fundamental that members are able to put forward questions to the leader, cabinet and chairs of the relevant committees. And that, quote, the questions should provide accountability within the full council forum. And I'm sure we could all agree on that. But there is some troubling language in the paper, and language is important. Words matter, particularly in constitutions, because they set the boundaries for acceptable action. The paper states that, quote, there is a lack of control within the structure of questions being put forward by members. Now, to my mind, control is not a concept that should be applied to councillors' questioning of the political leadership of this council. Of course, questions shouldn't be a platform for repetition of past or present work streams, and of course, frivolity should be gently discouraged, although it can be fun on occasion. I remember myself back in 2003 to 6 when I worked for Labour MPs in the House of Commons. I was massively impressed by those MPs who asked lots of questions because it showed that they were probing the system on behalf of their constituents or due to their interest in a policy area. I was less impressed by those who rarely asked questions because either everything was perfect for their constituents and their constituents never asked them to raise issues, or they never read their constituents' letters or heard their concerns, or they didn't think that the system of asking questions was effective, or they didn't have intellectual curiosity or moral intent to challenge the government or uncover deficiency, or they were just plain lazy. Now, each of these is troubling, and although we don't have the resources clearly of the UK civil service or indeed the House of Commons, the asking of questions in a democratic chamber to hold any form of government to account is a sign of a healthy democracy. Moving on to another part of the report. The chair, in the form of the mayor, quote, acting in consultation with the chief executive, close quotes, should be able to exclude questions pursuant to notices of motion on the basis, it seems, of, quote, taking into account the interest of the public and of the council. Let's just examine that. The briefing note states that the chair would be required to, quote, act reasonably while discharging this duty. But as we all know, the word reasonably is typical of English law in being subjective and a highly contestable concept. Who is to determine whether the mayor is acting reasonably? Who should determine what is in the, quote, interest of the public? It's the people who have been elected by the public to represent them in this chamber. It is us as councillors. How do we determine what is, quote, in the interest of the council? It is what is in the public interest, and it is our job as councillors and political groups to make sure that the public interest and the council interest are synonymous. It's worth noting that in the Commons, the Speaker does not get to determine what is in the interest of the public. He limits himself to making sure that rules of etiquette are followed and that questions are in order. The Speaker regards him or herself as a champion of backbench MPs and their role of holding the executive to account in a robust way in that role. So those drafting our council's constitution would do well to reflect on this. In conclusion, As the questions and motions potentially are ruled inappropriate or are restricted in scope, it's not so much follow the money, it's who gains from the silence. Who or what gains from limiting our right as councillors to ask questions or table motions? Not our constituents, not the wider borough, not scrutiny of political or technocratic leadership, not transparency, not good governance, not high standards, not, I fear, democracy itself. And I'd prefer to think that no one in this chamber fears democratic scrutiny, that no one is so confident of their policy proposals that they resent challenge or alternative or innovative ideas being suggested, and that no one in this chamber fears elected representatives like us, across the chamber, doing what they have a democratic mandate to do. Now, the best way to ensure that there are no grounds for such doubts is to keep the mechanisms of scrutiny as open as possible, to regard lots of motions and questions and a variety of motions and questions as a sign of strength and health, not weakness and decline.
Douglas.
Thank you very much, and I think I echo and agree with a lot of what Councillor Slinger has just said. And I think it's not just about the reporting of this report, and it doesn't mean we have to agree with it, and I certainly don't. And I think I was quite shocked to see some of the recommendations. I mean, certainly, as someone who puts in questions and has enjoyed doing so on behalf of residents, you know, I'm not aware of any questions repeating past work as outlined in the report, and there was no examples given. I think the report could have given some examples. It says, we don't want questions to dominate the entire meeting. Well, why not? Why not? That's what we're here for. That is what we're here for. We only meet 6 times a year. On occasions where you can put a motion in, there's a couple of occasions for ceremonies, full council. We only meet 6 times a year. But now we can only put 1 question in. Whew, and that's determined by someone else. And what I would say is that up until COVID, or we put the videos in, there was no formal notes. There's no formal notes, records of what was said 3 years back, 30 years back. So anyone can say anything. And as Councillor Slinger has alluded to, we need to be accountable. We should all embrace it, whether in leadership, opposition, it doesn't matter. We can't curtail motions and questions. Quite frankly, these recommendations and changes are just not making us accountable, an absolute affront to democracy, and I reject them wholeheartedly. Thank you very much.
Councillor O'Rourke.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not going to say too much, but I am really disappointed. I really thought we could sort of discuss this with you, Councillor Lowe. Jerry and I were quite happy to discuss it with you. I do think, our constitution needs to be reviewed, but not reviewing this sort of stuff. What it needs to be reviewed on is how we engage the public. We should be letting the public into this council chamber, allowing them to ask questions of councillors. Well, actually, the door's not open half the time and people are finding it extremely difficult to get in. And I'd like to be able to come in through the front door again, because accessibility is one of the key issues in terms of engagement. So perhaps we can look at opening that door up again so we can all come through that door. I am disappointed because at the end of the day, we always accept in good faith, because we've always been the minority here. When we lose, we lose. You've got the numbers. But, you know, you've got the numbers, so you can win on the numbers. So I don't understand why you want to control the notes, the motions, and the question pursuant, and give that power to the mayor. And actually, I'm mayor next year. God help you if we take control. Because I'm like, you're not speaking. You're not speaking. I'm ruling that out. Yeah. It just isn't. Look, joking aside, it just isn't really in the nature of this council. I've been here for over 30 years, as some of you have. And we always worked together. It was always inclusive. You knew what was going on. When Craig Humphreys was here, he'd tell you what was going on. You knew exactly what was coming. And it is so hugely disappointing. I know that, okay, some of the notice of motions might have been a bit long and whatever, but we could have worked with the Democratic Services Officer to remedy this. But it just feels as though this is just one more thing about where you're not working with us, where you want to shut us down. And, you know, it's really so disappointing because we worked with you, Councillor Lowe, through COVID. Joe and I were working non-stop every day, trying to do our best for the people of Rugby. And you recognise that. And then you do this to us and you're not prepared to engage the other two opposition leaders. I'll tell you what, I wouldn't do that to you. Thank you.
Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think we've all recognised, at least those of us who are prepared to admit it, that overview and scrutiny on this council is broken, damaged beyond repair. And it's what questions are part of that overview and scrutiny process. The more that we've had less connectivity in terms of overview and scrutiny, the more we've excluded the public, because the public doesn't get involved in the overview and scrutiny process anymore. When I was chairing it, we used to have members of the public put questions forward, ask us to set up task groups and work groups to look at things. That doesn't happen anymore. It's just an in-house committee. So overview and scrutiny is bust, broken, damaged beyond repair. This tonight is just a couple of more nails in that coffin of openness and transparency. Carry on like this, and you might find when you're not in charge, the rules can be just as tough for you.
Councillor Lowe.
Oh, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple of quick but important points I wanted to make. I mean, first of all, Councillor O'Rourke, I do thank you for your cooperation during COVID, and I do enjoy our working together, and I'm sorry that you feel that you're not included. We do have very regular meetings, all of us as group leaders. We also have many regular meetings outside of that cycle. We recently had one to talk about budgets, and Councillor Roodhouse was there. I couldn't help but notice you weren't there. So the opportunities are there for you to collaborate, but you don't always take them up, I suppose, is what I would say. I think really there's a disconnect tonight between an awful lot of the rhetoric that we've heard from the Labour and the Liberal Democrat groups and the rhetoric that we heard from them earlier on. Because earlier on, we heard all about how cross-party collaboration is how it should work, how we should have working parties to make these decisions, and that's what happened with this report. So this report was decided by one of the few working parties that we have on which this group does not have a majority. There is equal representation on that working party of each of the three groups here. So the Labour and the Liberal Democrat groups have a majority on that working party, and this is what they decided to do. Now, where I am with it, and I have to say the first I heard of it was when it hit the agenda, but where I am with it is quite simply this. I can understand the desire on the part of the other two party leaders to take this into a private, behind closed doors discussion. However, to do so would make an absolute mockery, a travesty, of the working party that is set up specifically to do this. What is the point of having a working party to review precisely these issues, one that is configured with a majority in your favour, and then the recommendations come to this council and you don't want them? And why don't you want them? It's because what you're saying is that the members of your group who sit on that working party haven't bothered to communicate what's been said back to your groups. Well, that's unfortunate, but that's a matter for you in terms of the management of your groups. So, for all these reasons, we will be supporting the report.
Just on a point of information, Madam Mayor, understanding orders, just to correct Councillor Lowe in what he just said, Councillor Bill Lewis actually sent track change documents to the Democratic Services Officer, Legal and Compliance on that. He did communicate to the group and he communicated to me, Leader, about his unhappiness about the whole thing. Report to follow on the agenda. So I didn't know what the report to follow was going to say, but it landed, and it landed with the rest of the group for the group meeting, which then had to take a decision on that, and the group took the decision, didn't like it. So you got two particular issues, and as was said when Councillor Lewis raised this, actually after Cabinet as well, because he was at Cabinet at that particular point, it was raised at that time, and we raised it with Legal and Governance at the time. One of the suggestions which I thought might play out all right, and it didn't, was actually could we review it in 12 months' time? And Legal and Governance said, yes, we'll put that in. Hadn't played it back to the group yet because I had a report to follow. Hadn't landed in SharePoint or anywhere. Again, a report to follow. A report from officers, not from you, Councillor Robbins, or Cabinet or anyone else. It was a report to follow. And that's the point of this again. Actually, it came in, and then it came into the group. Full communication and group discussion. Don't want it. Don't like it. Which is fine. You know, that's how it tends to work. So your point, Councillor Lowe, that certainly we had the position that that communication was going on, and it was slightly wider, going back into the system as well. So just to correct you on that, on a point.
Councillor O'Rourke.
Can I just say that I also shared the report with the whole of the group, and I also had discussions with the monitoring officer as well about our concerns about it. So absolutely what you've said, Councillor Roodhouse, we did the same. And when the whole of the group saw it, when it landed 2 days ago, they weren't happy with it.
Councillor Douglas.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, one of the points I did miss from my earlier rant was whether Councillor Lowe's also sort of taken into consideration the unintended consequences of limiting councillors to questions. I mean, I think there is a fair point in perhaps extending the time that officers or portfolio holders have to respond. But what about the unintended consequences of more FOI requests and the time impact on officers for this? So if we are going ahead with this, we certainly need a damn quick review of how well it's working, because I can assure you officers will soon be coming back saying, can we please return to the old way, because there'll be more FOI requests and we'll find ways and means around this, and maybe Councillor Tim Douglas won't put questions in, but resident Tim Douglas will. So come on, this is not a good proposal. Let's scrap it or let's review it as quickly as possible. Thank you very much.
Councillor Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Right. Well, the reason this report was late coming is because Councillor Lewis, quite rightly, reserved his right to review the original report, and several changes were made. And in order for those changes to be made, the report had to be a late report. And I just feel very sorry for Councillor Mahoney and Councillor Lewis, because everything that they've put forward within this report, as has been alluded to by Councillor Lowe, has been rubbished by their own groups. They obviously have no confidence in them, in the way that they have engaged in this report. And, well, I'm sorry, but that's how it comes across to us. And no, I'm sorry, I don't give way, Madam Mayor.
Point of order, Madam Mayor.
I don't give way, Madam Mayor.
I don't disrespect.
One moment, please, Councillor.
Thank you. I'm sorry, but I find this whole issue is trying to get round the problems that we've been having over the past months in questions and notices which are already being answered or are already in the process. And that is exactly why this has come about. And consequently, if you put a motion forward, which is a valid motion, which is not already being under discussion by the council, then of course it is valid. Of course it will be discussed by this council and in this chamber. And if it's something to go back to scrutiny, then it will go back to scrutiny. And I'm sorry, but I find that the whole attitude of both the other groups quite distressing, to be honest. I think Councillor Lewis and Councillor Mahoney conducted themselves extremely well in the review, and not only that, they put forward very valid points. They could have overruled everything I said. They did not have to put forward the report as it is. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, councillors. Can we just take a small break while we wait for some councillors to come back into the debate? And then may I just ask Councillor O'Rourke, have you a point of explanation?
Yeah, it's just to clarify the point that I have the utmost respect for all of my councillors, but as a group, we take decisions as a group and review stuff as a group, and Councillor Mahoney reported back. And, you know, sometimes you report back to your group and they might not like what you're saying, but the group takes the decision ultimately. That's the point of order.
Thank you, councillors. We'll just remain silent and remain where you are for just a moment, please.
I move on to standing orders that the vote be taken now.
Fair enough, councillor. Appreciate we can't wait any further. We have asked for a respite. The councillors are just coming back in now, so could we just bear with them 2 minutes, please? So we're going to vote on item 7E. Those in favour, please show. Do you need a counter? Those against, please show. The motion is carried. That's okay. The next item is to receive the report of the Chief Officer. Councillor Ellis, you have a point to raise?
I do. I just want some clarification, if I may. I thought you couldn't vote on something if you've been out of the room. If you're out of the room while something is discussed, you are not able to vote.
I've just taken clarification on that, councillors. During the debate, the councillors were in the room, and at the start of that debate, and our executive have ruled that it is allowed.
Can I have full clarification of what the rule is, please?
Councillors, Mr. Roberts and Deepa Roberts, could you just confirm that you were both present at the start of that debate?
Yeah. Mrs. Mayor, I'd like to report.
Councillor Roberts, Deepa Roberts, could you oh, sorry, yeah. Howard first.
Yeah, we received a contact through the internet tonight that the fourth to die in the boys that were walking on the frozen pond, the 6-year-old died today. So that's 4 total. I think we all would send our...
Councillor Roberts. Councillor Deepa Roberts, thank you.
It's not. Is it on? Yes. When this debate started, we were here. When everybody finished and Councillor Robbins was finishing, then we went out just to discuss the matter that we've just had, and then we rushed back in for the vote. So we were throughout it. We listened to what everybody had to say. So we were in this debate. They are my witness. You were in and out several times to the machine. No, listen. We were throughout it. We just went out for a few minutes and we came out. We were all...
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Thank you. We'll just, if you could just remain in your seats, please, while we take a short break. Could we just, on a moment, could we pause the live stream, please?
It needs to be debated in public. I'm sorry, this is unfair. You can't
Madam Mayor,
stop.
you shouldn't stop the live streaming.
I have made that election, and it is just to give a break. Please, councillors, just stay in your seats and we will ask for a slight... Given the questions raised on the validity of the vote on item 7E, there will now be a vote to defer this item to a future meeting. As chair, I move to defer this item. Can I ask for a seconder? Thank you, councillor. We will now take it to the vote. Those in favour, please show. Those against, please show. The motion to defer is carried. The next item on the agenda is to receive the report of the Chief Officer, Operations and Traded Services set out in item 7F of the agenda. The report concerns a review of the Council's garden waste service. Councillor Lowe, will you move the report?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I so move.
Who will second the motion?
I will, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Lowe.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm conscious of the fact the clock is ticking this evening, so I hope what I have to say will be received in a very straightforward and collaborative fashion. It certainly should be. So look, this report has been driven by the fact there are a number of concerns regarding how green waste collection services operate in this borough. So to be absolutely crystal clear, this is a service which needs to run properly and efficiently. Collections need to be as reliable as possible, and it is therefore vital that we take a look at the way in which the service operates to ensure that the people who subscribe to it get the full service that they pay for, and that the service operates as effectively as possible. That is the purpose of the report. I would, before I sit down, just like to very clearly and directly address one of the key concerns prompted by this report, and I am happy to guarantee very loudly and clearly that we will not be increasing the cost of green bin collection next year. The cost of green bin collection will remain at £40 in the next financial year. Now, I have seen the figures, as we all have, regarding the loss the service is making. However, it is my firm belief that in the current cost of living crisis, hard-pressed households do not need their own costs increasing. My hope will be that the group convened as a result of the adoption of this report will establish what can be done to ensure the service is delivered as efficiently as possible at no additional cost. And that is the purpose of the group that we propose to convene. I'll sit down now.
Councillor Douglas.
Thank you very much. Just not to continue the previous day, but it does amaze me when people say the clock's ticking. Well, I enjoy council meetings. We need more questions, more motions. We need more time here. We're only here 6 times a year. Let's talk it out, let's debate, let's get things done. So, on a serious note, I obviously acknowledge the report cross-party group will be set up to look at how the service is efficient, reliable and value for money. However, I would request that the working group perhaps also look at the environmental impact of the decision to introduce the green bin charge. We don't need to reopen the debate, but one of the key things back in 2016, 2017, when it first was introduced, was that the documents that the council officers provided in every council that introduced a green bin charge in the preceding months and years, fly tipping increased in every area. So as well as looking at the efficiency, the value for money, we need to look at the environmental impact of this policy, including fly tipping, whether that has increased across the borough, in order to try and put forward alternatives and feed into the reliability and efficiency of the service going forward. And I hope that is something that the working group can also include. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Councillor Mistry.
It's not going to be early night, I can assure you. I think after listening to the last report and the shenanigan that went on, this one, it says clearly that we're going to look at the cost. And when I look at one of the items on the recommendation, and then you go down, I just asked the officer, there is a budget pressure of £204,000. Does it mean that it's running at a loss? And suddenly the leader says it doesn't, it's not going to go up.
I can give, and I've been talking to the officers, they know my feelings about the green bins, they're my favourite subject, you know, and every time I help the council, and then I said, if you got half the 50% of the bins which are not being paid for, they're our property, yeah, and we should be taking them back, yeah, it's a simple maths. You got new development going on, and we can recycle and use them over there. When you look at in the urban area, and Councillor Parker, I can remember, under her leadership, she brought in the £40, desperately needed the money. You gave them for nothing, and people say it's nice to have it. Nice to have it, and well, it cost me nothing. And in the urban area, people didn't even have the garden. You go down around this mile of this town centre, I keep telling you, you see the deprivation and cost of living. It's not happened overnight in September. It happened ages ago, and it carries on. And they become fly tipping. People just are lying in the street, and it's our policy to pick them up if they're not paying for it and just leaving out in the street, accumulating, you know, the fly tipping and contaminations in it, and it's a health hazard, yeah? And I got pictures. Dan knows very well what I've said. I've been to work service unit and work with them and trying to get them off the street because it's our property and we own it. So I think having another working party, yeah, it's not my job about efficiency. I'll leave it to this expert here. They're paid to do the job, not my job to do about efficiency. Because I've just learned from the last one, those sitting on the working party are not the expert on it, yeah? And they go back to their group and they tell them what's going on. So, Madam Mayor, clearly, these are the rush report flagged in again at the 11th hour, and we got another one on the blue paper about the, you know, the trade waste. Yeah, why do we have to wait until the 11th, 7 years, 8 years, and trying to increase it and double the thing? People don't see that. So we need to look, I keep saying it, we have a lot of service charges. She knows very well. They were all flagged up 5, 6 years ago under her leadership. And here we are today, Madam Mayor, that we should be looking at annually the charges that we charge the public, yeah? And in line with inflation. And don't wait until 7 years and suddenly start putting 40, 50%. So I don't see the merit of this working party and what it's going to achieve, because I don't see that we are the expert in it. I leave it to the officer. Cost, he just contradicted what the report says. Yeah, and I asked the officer, what's the pressure in the budget pressure? He says it's the running at the loss. So somewhere on the line, when it comes to the budget setting, you put that in, the 204,000, up it, and then we'll see what the public think. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Parker.
Well, I had absolutely no intention of speaking, but it appears that my mere presence, I am the spectre of budgets past. And until I was demoted by my party, I know. Trust me, mate, I don't need any of those. Look. As I said, I had no intention of speaking. I have always said that this service needs to be efficiently run and needs to reflect the customers it serves. It should not be a cost borne by people who do not use it. And I do think that the working party is necessary, and I do think that there are a number of things that it does need to look at. But I think in the spirit of cooperation, it is quite unfair to throw back at the portfolio holder who introduced the charge. When was it? God, I was actually a size 12 then. 7 years ago. My goodness, didn't have any wrinkles either. I do think it's a little bit out of line to be putting the ailments of this service at a portfolio holder who's not been in position since 2019. Thank you very much.
Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I had absolutely no intention of speaking either, Lisa. I'm sure you fit into a size 12. There you go. Compliment to you. But, look, seriously, though, there is an issue with green bins, and it is something which I, too, have raised very much with the officers. The problem I've got with working parties is frankly, you say a cost to the taxpayer, but actually we are a cost to the taxpayer. You know, we are being... We get an allowance. So actually we are a cost too. And I would also just say that we have experts, as Councillor Mystery says, we have experts in this room who do project management, people management, time motion studies, all of these things already. I am quite sure that they know exactly where these bins are, certainly because I'm also one of the ones who's gone round, just like Councillor Mystery, and said, they're all down that street, they're all here. These bins here don't have a sticker on. They should be taken away, and they should be recycled, and they should be given to the new estates or anyone else who wants them, because new bins, at the end of the day, cost us money. So let's save some money, let's improve the efficiency, but we don't need this group. What we need is just a commitment to try and tighten the efficiency processes that we already have, get them a bit tighter, get them more efficient, and get the officers out there with the workers and get the bins picked up. That's all we need to do.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Any further speakers?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a quick question. I'm really pleased that the increase in charges isn't going to be introduced, but I'm also a bit worried. Is this the start of a 3 weekly bin collection?
May I? Thank you. Well, I will be very brief in my responses because the response to all of you is very straightforward. Councillor Douglas, I always enjoy your contributions. You know, why use 2 words when 5,000 would do? The answer to your question is yes, of course it will consider the environmental considerations. I think next was Councillor Mystery. Councillor Mystery, I'm stunned by your response. We've literally spent the first half of this meeting with everybody on your side of this chamber saying councillors need to be making decisions. We need to be doing it on a cross-party basis. And here you are saying you don't want to be making that decision, you don't want to be involved in this working party, just leave it to the officers. Now, both those positions are legitimate ones to take, but I hope you'll accept there is a bit of a disconnect between those two positions. Councillor Parker, as ever, I enjoyed your amusing comment, and I don't believe that there is any culpability of any issue or non-issue to you, because you have vacated this post several years ago. Councillor Ellis, I think you made the point about us not needing the working party. Actually, I think we do need a working party because there are a number of complex decisions to be made, and I would like those decisions to be made with the full scrutiny that your own group has banged on about saying we needed all evening. So, look, you can't very well stand there and say we need more scrutiny, we need more cross-party decision-making, and then complain when that has been offered to you. Councillor New, no. There you go. Thank you very much.
Thank you, councillors. On that basis, we will now take it to the vote. Those in favour, please show. Those against, please show. The motion is carried. Notices of motion pursuant to Standing Order 11, set out at item 8 of the agenda, are 3 notices of motion. In accordance with the Council standing orders, I consider that the motions should be dealt with this evening. Councillor Gillies, will you please move the motion set out at item 8A on the agenda, notice of which has been given under Standing Order 11?
Madam Mayor, I so move.
Who will second the motion?
I will second the motion, Madam Mayor, and reserve my right to speak.
I call on Councillor Gillies to speak his motion.
Madam Mayor, some people are on the pitch. They think it's all over. It is now. That was the commentary spoken by Kenneth Wolstenholme and heard by me as a 12-year-old at that iconic moment when Geoff Hurst scored that 4th goal in the dying seconds and England won the World Cup in 1966. What a moment in time, a moment that would live forever inside those that witnessed it.
Present generations keep on waiting. But at that time, I was one of 2 youngsters in the village of Paleton that owned a football. I remember taking mine out into the backyard and kicking it against the back wall of the house, thinking that it was me that had scored that goal. How many other youngsters up and down the country did the same? Strangely, though, it was a totally different sport that captured my undivided interest following that first visit to Brandon. At that time, when we spoke of Brandon, we only thought of the Speedway. Us kids didn't even realise that Brandon was actually a village. That was in 1969, a sporting experience that will live with me forever. The spectacles, the skills, the daring. But what is sport? The Oxford English Dictionary states an activity involving physical exertion and skill in which an individual or team competes against another or others for entertainment. Sport can be totally physical, can require equipment like a bat, a racket, a ball or machine, either powered or non-powered. Being able to see these sports, to become a fan, to become a competitor, the sports clearly need to be accessible. The package of motorsports hosted at Brandon were unique to any other venue in Warwickshire, Leicestershire and Northamptonshire. In fact, the closest venue to promote the package is over 90 miles away near King's Lynn. Looking more closely into the borough's history, we find that there is no other sporting venue that has attracted such world-class quality competition, spectator numbers or live television broadcasts as Brandon Stadium. Its first Speedway meeting took place on the 29th of September 1928, and apart from a break during the Second World War, when the front buildings were used for aircraft workshops. The Brandon B Speedway team was formed when the stadium reopened after the war, and in 1954 stock car racing was introduced. In addition, the stadium hosted many other forms of motorsport, including midget cars, sidecars, quad bikes, banger racing, Formula 2 stock cars, mini stocks and go-karts. All racing was staged during the season between the months of March and October, continuing annually until the current owners, Brandon Estates, closed the stadium and evicted the sports at the end of 2016. Excuse me. For more than 50 years, the stadium was run impeccably by promoter Charles Ochiltree MBE and his family, regarded as the leading promotion in the UK. But following his death, the stadium was sold in 2003 and subsequently sold again to the property developer who took over full responsibility for the stadium at the end of the 2016 season, without the sports having an option to purchase and retain the sporting facility. Following a fact-finding mission between April 2014 and May 2018, I visited every speedway venue in the UK and some stock car circuits, from Edinburgh in the north to Plymouth in the south, 26 in total, to establish that Brandon Stadium was the best oval-shaped motorsport stadium in the country and famous the world over. The Bees were the club every rider wanted to race for and the best supported team in the country. The stadium was universally considered within stock car racing as the Wembley of the sport, which is why it drew the highest number of driver entrants and the biggest crowds. There have been 2,052 speedway meetings staged at Brandon, including 31 British finals, 2 World Cup finals, 21 international test matches, 3 World Championship Grand Prix, each attracting over 10,000 spectators and the best 20 riders in the world, televised live and was happening here in the Borough of Rugby. Now staged in another country, Wales, at the centrally located Principality Stadium in Cardiff, bringing over 35,000 paying fans into the heart of the city. There have also been 508 Formula 1 stock car meetings, 12 British Championship finals and 21 World Stock Car finals. The Bees have won many major titles, including 8 British Speedway League Championships, the last in 2010, winning the title away at Poole in the last meeting of the season. And rugby-based Chris Harris, voted the Speedway Rider of the Year by the World Speedway Riders Association, is featured on an incredible, amazing YouTube clip entitled Chris Harris, Man of Steel, and viewed 1.7 million times, and must be seen to be believed. Top riders of race for the Bees, including 8 British champions, who between them won 20 British titles, the last being Danny King in 2016. Been 6 world champions, who between them won 16 world titles, including Hans Nielsen, the Great Dane himself, Ollie Olsen, and Americans Billy Hamill and Greg Hancock. Riders from 14 different countries have represented the Bees. 29 Australians, 19 Danes, 15 Poles, 12 Swedes, 7 Americans, 7 New Zealanders, plus riders from Czechoslovakia, Czech Republic, Germany, Finland and Russia. Many of those riders made their homes in the Borough of Rugby. British riders also made their homes in the Borough. Riders as far back as Jack Parker, whose motorcycle shop still exists on Lawford Road, was described on a Pathé News YouTube clip filmed at the Empire Stadium, Wembley, in 1932, in front of 90,000 fans, as the current world champion. And he lived in Percival Road until his death in 1990. Mr. Coventry Speedway, Nigel Bucock, he lived in Addison Road. The 3 times British champion, Chris Bomber Harris, who relocated from his native Cornwall to Binley Woods and now lives in Corston, and new elected president of the World Speedway Riders Association, and highly respected former international Jimmy McMillan also lives within sight of this town hall. In the 1970s and 80s, Speedway regularly featured on terrestrial television, as at that time being the second largest spectator sport in the UK. But from the year 2000 up until the forced closure at the end of 2016, 61 meetings were televised live from Bandon, here in the Borough of Rugby, all of which are on Sky Sports. The record attendance is believed to have been 29,000 for the testimonial of Nigel Bucock. However, far more choice in modern times, so much more sport on television, Brandon Stadium still attracted more people for a single sporting event than any other borough sporting venue. The average attendance in 2016 was 2,111, with the highest being 11,000 for the World Stock Car Final.
Councillor Gilliath, I'm going to give you a little break and just ask, sorry, if you don't mind. Yes. It's fabulous history, and I'm just looking at time and wondering if we can sort of presciate
one
down.
more minute to go, Madam Mayor, and we're
Fabulous, thank you for that.
there. Okay, now, domestic Speedway League racing drew people from local community to support their local team, and many of those would add to the sustainability of local businesses. The chip shop in Woolston, for instance, the pubs in Bretford, Brandon, Woolston, Binley Woods, as well as the Brandon Club, which 6 years after the closed, still hosts regular 30-night meetings for the Nuneaton Speedway Supporters Club. International Speedway meetings and stock car meetings drew crowds from further afield, again bringing benefits to the local businesses, including local hotels. But where sporting facilities remain, they can evolve as the sports themselves evolve, to include a variety of sports to meet the needs of the local and wider communities. It should be noted that a highly respected businessman, Warren Hunter, had made an offer to purchase the stadium recently, and rugby-based business Nationwide Windows Managing Director John Whaley, who employs 500 staff, has committed his company to help rebuild the stadium to its former glory, along with many other business offering to support if the opportunity can be realised. I will finish this message with a message from Danny King, the 2016 British champion, winning his title at Bellevue, Manchester, and who raced for the Bees up until the closure in the end of 2016. The day I was handed my race suit with the B on the chest was the proudest of my life. I'd always had a dream of riding for Coventry Bees, and I was lucky enough to do that for 2 years. I really don't want to ride anywhere else. I'm not a religious man, but I pray the Bees will continue, and I'll be lucky enough to captain them once again. I'll keep everything crossed. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gillies. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Lowe.
I will speak very briefly, Madam Mayor. I could not possibly follow Councillor Gillies' outstanding and very moving speech. What I will say is, unlike Councillor Gillies, I have no personal interest in the sport of Speedway. I've never watched it, certainly never played it. It's not my sport of choice. However, I am a huge fan of heritage, and I am a huge fan of community. Now, what this is not to suggest is that we should definitely go ahead and do something. What it is suggesting that we should explore what it is possible that can be done. I think there is sufficient groundswell of a public opinion out there to suggest this might be worth looking at for us to at least seriously consider whether it is a possibility. There will be a more meaningful debate once that information is back, but I think we should look into seeing whether this is a possibility. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Councillor. On that basis, I shall invite one more speaker, Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. One of the problems, when this was actually brought up in the hearing in public for the local plan many moons ago, one of the concerns that the residents had was that there was no protection for the stadium. We have no policy on stadia at Rugby Borough Council. We have an open space policy, but not an enclosed space, which a stadium is. So I would suggest if you want to protect stadiums, be they at Brandon or Butlin Road, start with a policy on stadiums.
Councillor Howard-Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I totally support Tony and the people that are trying to keep this facility available to people. Because what we know is that once it's built on, it will never be rebuilt on again. And there are so short of situations where these facilities are functioning. We must look at ours, get something suitable that fulfills the requirement of leisure and well-being, and hopefully we've got a good connection between us and Coventry after that. But don't just house it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I shall now put the... Oh, one more speaker before Tony comes back.
Just in the spirit of very positive cross-political cooperation, Councillor Gillies, I'd love to work with you to help Brandon the stadium. I've got a lot of work experience and investments behind stadia, so I'd be very happy to sit with you for a cup of coffee and see what I could do with my contacts. I just want to use the opportunity also to raise a point that Councillor Edwards and I have also been looking into, is regarding Butlin Road. And councillors may or may not be aware, but Butlin Road was very recently, 2 days ago, granted a consent for a non-football, a non-sporting development on the site. And I just ask all councillors just to help keep an eye that the original use, the intention of that site for football is maintained and due scrutiny is applied over the coming years. That's all.
Councillor Gillies.
Thank you very much, Councillor Moran, for that offer. Fantastic. I could just say that the council and its members are, of course, the custodians of our borough's history and sporting heritage, particularly those sports and venues that have provided leisure and well-being for generations to partake, enjoy and support. The sports, as already stated, cross the local and wider communities. They cross counties and continents. There are no barriers. Friendships are created in those sporting communities that last for a lifetime. The well-being created can't be found or measured in any document or policy statement, because it's here, deep in your hearts and minds, and it is carried with us on our journey through life. Members, please support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor. On that basis, we will now put the motion to the vote. Those in favour, please show. Those against, please show. Do we need any abstentions? No. The motion is carried. Councillor Ms Livesey, Will you please move the motion set out at item 8B of the agenda, notice of which has been given under Standing Order 11?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I so move.
Who will second the motion?
I'll second the motion and reserve my right to speak.
I call on Councillor Miss Livesey to speak to her motion.
So the genesis of this motion came from my friend who came to stay with me a couple of weeks ago, and we decided to go for a walk around Draycott Water. You can't go for a walk around Draycott at the moment because they're building some sort of mechanism to allow the reservoir to be emptied should it become dangerously full, which seemed to be a bit ironic. Because it looked really quite empty to me. I walk around there very regularly, and parts of the reservoir, the floor was visible, and also the lagoon by the bird hide looked pretty much dried out. Draycott supplies water for Rugby and for Coventry, and it's got a capacity of 23 million cubic metres. But last week, on the 5th of December, it was only 71.5% full. That's less than 3/4 full. And that's following the driest July we've had for 100 years. At that time, Severn Trent were pumping 100 million litres of water a day into the water system. According to the Energy Saving Trust, an average family will use 345 litres of water a day. That's every day. So if we're going to build this 11,000 homes that have been referred to in some of the documents we've looked at tonight, that means that an extra 1.4 billion litres of water will be required per year, or an extra 3.8 million litres of water a day. Now, I don't know whether Draycott Water has enough water in it, if it was full, to be able to deal with all that, given that Coventry is also building more houses. But I do think that we really ought to know, because climate change is clearly having an impact on the level of water in Draycott. We don't know what that ultimate impact is going to be on climate change in future, but I'm pretty sure it's not going to be a good one. So that's the reason why I'm moving this motion, because I would really think that we ought to be asking, if we are going to build these houses, where is the water going to come from?
Any further speakers? Councillor Miss New.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do support this motion. I actually mentioned about this issue pre-local plan of how we were going to cope with all the extra housing, not just the water supply, but also the sewage. At that point, we said we would get information, but I've not seen or heard anything since, so it definitely needs to be raised. Thank you.
Any other speakers? Councillor Miss Livesey, would you like to come back? Oh, Councillor Crane, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Livesey, for your motion. I'm going to disappoint you and say we won't be supporting it, not because we don't agree with the sentiment behind it. I do very much share your views that water supply, I think, is a big issue, particularly with climate change. But it's just because we are already doing that work, and the work is already in progress and underway, and it's part of the adaptation plans in the Climate Change Strategy and Action Plan. I do have a much longer speech here that I was going to read out, but I mean, essentially, you yourself and Councillor Harrington were at the last meeting of the Climate Change Working Group where this topic came up, and we did talk about the West Midlands Combined Authority, together with Sustainability West Midlands, has produced a climate change risk assessment and adaptation plan, of which this is one of the considerations that they're looking at. And as part of that, Rugby is going to be doing its own climate change risk assessment and adaptation plan, again, which was discussed at the Climate Working Group. So it's just to say that Rugby is very much an active partner in all of this, and absolutely share your sentiments. It's not that we don't want to do it, it's just we already are doing it. And we did also talk at the working group about inviting different stakeholders to come in, and Severn Trent is actually one of the people on the list that we do want to get to come into the working group, and we will be inviting them in. So we'll all have a chance to question them then, or those of us on the working group, what they are doing to address this. But just wanted to assure everyone that these discussions are already underway, at a county level and with the West Midlands Combined Authority, and we will be pursuing them at a Rugby level as well. So that was the reasons for not supporting it tonight.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other speakers? Councillor Livesey.
I don't want to say anything more.
Thank you. On that note, we shall take a vote. I shall not put the motion to the vote. Those in favour, please show. Those against, please show. I don't think that's enough. Right, councillors, we're going to start again. Those in favour, please show. Those against, please show. Councillors, just so that we have our numbers and just to be clear, 18 votes for, 18 votes against, an abstention of 1, and as the Mayor, I have a second vote, which takes that vote to 19 against, so the motion is defeated. Moving on to the next item, Councillor Moran, will you please move the motion set out at item 8C of the agenda, notice of which has been given under Standing Order 11.
I did. I will.
Who will second the motion?
I will second the motion, Madam Mayor, and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor. I call on Councillor Moran to speak to his motion.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. And I'll be very, very brief. First, just a point of clarity, Councillor Lowe. It is possible to have a nuance in a political position, and clearly, on this side, we do want more debate, more interrogation, more collaborative work. I think the reference to a particular technical point that we want to defer to officers is separate. On this motion, there's two elements. First, genuine, apolitical, multi-skilled forum for the town centre is long needed. I think Councillor Pickett alluded to that. One that involves all stakeholders. Local businesses are crying out for that initiative. And again, to actually enact meaningful change, we've got to get around the table. With economic prospects as they are for the next couple of years, this type of initiative is very important. Such a forum does, though, need a clear role, authority for decision-making. We've got to let businesses whose livelihoods, but also whose mental health and welfare do depend on a successful town centre to determine how best to spend what meagre funds are available. I'd wager if you asked town centre businesses top of their wish list, they probably wouldn't say, for example, directional signage. I will bang on about town centre parking once again. A few meetings ago, I was told it would cost £700,000. Let the figures prove themselves in months to come. But the very fact that independent retailers are clubbing together to have to reimburse customers parking, I believe, reinforces and supports my argument that parking charges are an unnecessary tax. Second, on to Rugby First. Oh God, it just needs full transparency. Items are detailed in the motion, bare minimum necessary to enable true accountability, such as a service level agreement, robust accounting. And please, when a host of directors resign, they should make clear why they are resigning. Likewise, when new directors are proposed, their background, their skill set should be explained. That's the minimum that would be required in a corporate environment. So why should we accept less as a council? Thanks.
Any further speakers? Councillor Picker.
Sorry. So I don't fundamentally disagree with a lot of the comments you've made, but I would argue that's why it's so important that we have the town centre strategy, which we've just adopted, which will look at a lot of this work in detail going forward. I've already referred to a lot of the general points in the points we've had earlier on today. In terms of engaging with town centre businesses, yes, absolutely. There isn't a group of rugby businesses, Rugby Collective. They're engaging with officers. I personally am engaging with them. I went to one of their meetings a couple of months ago, listened to them, fed some of that detail back. So that work is ongoing, as is work on a review of Rugby First, which I think Councillor Roodhouse alluded to earlier for reasons for a deferral. So again, all this work is already underway. So it will continue, and therefore this motion is not necessary.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Rourke.
It's always necessary to engage with all the stakeholders, and I engage with a lot of the independent businesses in the town, as you probably know, because I'm one of the town centre councillors. And just one example of where we get it so wrong was not too long ago when we had the big fair in the town centre and all the stuff going on. There was no car parking, and I asked ages ago when Councillor Moran put in a thing about parking, I put on the end of that I wanted to have the John Barford sort of car park reviewed. I've never heard anything else because the night time economy sometimes is really busy. Well, that was a prime example of, you know, businesses working with us to understand what the need was. You couldn't get parking anywhere because the car parks have been used for all of the fairgrounds, and the John Barford car park shut down really early, and people that were going to Rugby Theatre couldn't get in. It was a complete nightmare. So this is why we need to work together.
Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I do have some sympathy for this motion. I'm also a town centre councillor. Most of my ward falls within the town centre, with Ben across on the other side of Church Street. So we do have a affinity in terms of the town centre. I do find I can actually get on and do things more quickly by working with partners in the town centre, with St Andrew's Church and other agencies, more quickly than getting things through this council, to be quite honest. So I think there is a good case for local collaboration and local cooperation. Indeed, I have worked with councillors from other parties, from other divisions, county councillors, on solving local problems. So any forum that assists us moving things forward, that doesn't get the dead hand of the state slowing things down, will be more than welcome.
I see there are no further speakers, so I call on Councillor Moran.
Thank you. I'll be very, very quick and brief. Thank you, Councillor Picker, for the opening to engage. If that's the only facility to do that, then clearly that's what's available. I want to say something about Rugby First again, and also I never want to be accused of speaking behind someone's back. So I believe passionately in the rights of free speech and the democratic process by which we're all elected. We all talk about Rugby First for its retail economic role, but also having studied the Rugby First business plan, produced in the midst of the pandemic, a key aspect of that role of Rugby First is to help coordinate safe and secure spaces for rugby's population and to effectively communicate government advice on COVID-19. Now, God willing, we will not have another pandemic, but clearly it cannot be ruled out. I ask, therefore, if someone gained fame, notoriety, for being a disbeliever in the science behind COVID and gained infamy for not wearing masks, being anti-vaccine, how can that party carry the responsibilities of a directorship of Rugby First? Either they were wrong previously and would wish to apologise before going forward, or they cannot sign up to a business plan which has been subscribed to. It's one or the other.
That being the end of the debate, we will now put to motion the vote. Those in favour, please show. Those against, please show. The motion is defeated. That takes us to item 9 on the agenda, correspondence. Is there any correspondence, Chief Executive?
There is none, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, councillors. Common Seal, item 10. I move that the Common Seal be affixed to the various orders, deed and documents referred to in the agenda. Who will second the motion?
Madam Mayor.
Those in favour, please show. Those against, please show. The motion is carried. Item 11, motion to exclude the public under section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972. I hesitated there. To consider passing the following resolution under section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public shall be excluded from the meeting for the following items of the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of information defined in paragraphs 2 and 3 of Schedule 12A of the Act. I so move. Who will second the motion?
I will, Madam Mayor.
Those in favour, please show. Those against, please show. The motion is carried. That concludes the public part of the meeting. May I take this opportunity to wish the people of Rugby and yourself, reporter, a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Could we stop the live stream? Thank you.